Hey guys, tonight we're doing something different. We're not travelling to palaces or ancient wonders. No, tonight you're headed to a place where history gets very cold, very fast, where survival is a miracle and optimism is usually a bad sign. Welcome to the Soviet Gulag system. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The train door slams shut behind you, sealing out what little light remains. You're not even sure how long it's been. Hours, days, maybe weeks, you've lost track. You're packed into the car so tightly that sitting is a group negotiation, and the floor is, well, technically, it exists beneath the hay and the stink. Some people are coughing hard, others just stare blankly ahead, lips cracked, skin greyed out. One man hasn't moved in 2 days, nobody checks anymore. You're all in the same cargo, human beings labelled as enemies of the people. The Gulag system didn't start as a full-blown death trap, but wow, it evolved into one fast. Stalin's purges brought it into industrial-scale horror. Imagine a prison system designed not just to punish, but to erase physically, mentally, and spiritually. You didn't need to be guilty of anything to end up here. A careless word, a jealous neighbour, a professor who paused too long before clapping during a speech, and once the machine had you, it didn't let go. Your destination, that's a mystery. The guards don't answer questions. The cold leaking in through the cracks suggests north, far north. Maybe Kalima? Maybe Vorkuta? Could be some logging camp that doesn't even have a name. You look out the slit in the train wall, and the trees blur past, snow-covered, endless. Civilization ended several thousand birch trees ago. When the train finally groans to a stop, you're not relieved. Just numb. You spill out into the snow, stumbling, blinking, against a flat grey sky. It's so quiet it hurts your ears, until the shouting starts. Guards with dogs and rifles herd you like livestock. Faster, move! You see a woman slip on the ice. She tries to get up. A boot lands hard on her spine. She doesn't try again. You thought the train ride was the hard part. You were wrong. Intake is a blur of shouting, standing, stripping. You're forced to undress in the wind in front of everyone. Your old clothes vanish into a pile. From now on you wear what they give you. A lumpy canvas uniform, boots 2 sizes too big, and maybe, a hat with a torn lining if you're lucky. Personal items? Gone. Family photos? Confiscated or burned. Names? Irrelevant. You're a number now. Your number starts with the camp code. It's followed by digits that mean everything to the guards and nothing to you. The camp is surrounded by layers of barbed wire. And beyond that, nothing but forest, or tundra, or mountains. One thing's certain, you're not walking out of here. The guard towers are spaced just far enough apart to ensure overlapping fields of fire. The searchlights sweep lazily, as if even they are bored of this whole nightmare. You shuffle into your assigned barracks, stepping over mud, slush, and who knows what. Inside it's dark, the walls are lined with wooden bunks, planks really, stacked 3 high, close enough to share your neighbour's breath whether you want to or not. A wood stove stands in the centre, cold and quiet. You won't see it burning much. Your bunkmate is a skeleton in motion, hollow-eyed, wrapped in a blanket so thin it might as well be a rumour. He doesn't talk. He doesn't need to. His hands say enough. Cracked, raw, fingers curled into claws from frostbite. Someone mutters a warning. Don't sleep too deep, you might not wake up. The first night you try to stay alert. You try to process, you try to understand what this place is, but your body wins. It drags you under into a sleep that's less rest and more temporary shutdown. You dream of warmth, of bread, of being somewhere anywhere else. There's a lot the history books tidy up about the Gulag, one clean term for a sprawling monster of prisons, labour camps, transit hubs, punishment cells and exile zones. Some were converted monasteries, others were slapped together in the middle of nowhere using prisoner labour. It was bureaucracy meets brutality. Some camps had proper roofs and walls, others were just tents in -40. The system wasn't efficient, it was massive. Millions passed through it. Nobody knows the exact number who died. Maybe 1 million, maybe 2, maybe far more. Records were lost or cooked, depending on who needed to look good in Moscow. There's a weird irony here. One of the things that kept this whole nightmare running? Paperwork, reams and reams of it. Even your arrival here was accompanied by signatures, stamps, dossiers, a file fat enough to make someone feel official. The Soviet machine loved its paperwork. It just didn't care if you survived it. Out in the distance, a siren blares. The barracks door creaks open. A new day's begun. You blink into the thin morning light and realise with a slow, creeping dread, this is your life now. Every minute will be a gamble. Every breath a negotiation with cold, hunger, and despair. The camp isn't just a prison. It's a machine. You're the fuel. Some prisoners clung to the hope that someone back home would fight for them. A wife, a parent, a university colleague. But the cruel trick of the Gulag? It erased not just your freedom, but your existence. You didn't vanish into the night. You were processed, reassigned, warehoused, and used up. When you died, they wrote pneumonia or heart failure on a form and moved on. But tonight, you're still alive. You've made it through the first night, and that's more than some can say. The sun doesn't rise in the way you remember it. It just sort of leaks into the sky, grey and slow, like someone poured cold ash across the clouds. The wind slices straight through your bones as you line up outside the barracks, boots crunching on the frosted mud. Someone beside you is coughing up blood, and no one says a word. You stand stiff until the head count begins. It's not quick, the guards shout names, but most prisoners only respond with numbers. A few are dead. That complicates things. Nobody moves them. The bodies just slump forward into the snow like discarded sacks of grain. You're marched to breakfast in silence, down a frozen path between rusted wire fences, one foot in front of the other. It's not far, but every step feels like a negotiation with gravity. Inside the mess hall, the air is thick with steam and despair. You're handed a tin bowl. No one smiles, no one greets. What they give you is a ladle of something, technically soup. It's watery, floating with a few shreds of cabbage and, if you're lucky, one slippery piece of fish spine. You eat standing as quickly as your numbed fingers allow. Some old hands lick the bowl after, eyes closed like it's dessert. You learn not to waste even a smell. Then, without pause, you're herded again. This time toward the trains. Not the big ones, not the long journeys. These are work site transfers. You're headed to the mines. The rail car is open this time. No roof, just metal and wind. You grip the side to stay upright as it rattles forward. Around you, frostbitten hills, skeleton trees, and the occasional tower. Somewhere in this wilderness you'll be unloading rock, clearing snow, maybe digging into permafrost with a bent shovel. You don't know yet. Nobody tells you until you're already doing it. Worksite distribution is more art than science. Some guards just shove you toward the nearest shouting superorder. Others assign based on a weird logic that doesn't quite make sense. Height, maybe? Build? Or just bad luck? You're dropped at a strip mine that looks like it was carved out of a glacier by angry gods. The wind whips through the valley. The tools are scattered on the ground like broken toys. Someone hands you a pickaxe. The handle is cracked. No gloves, no safety gear. Just your bare hands and the warning, if you break it, you'll be left to dig with your fingers. And people have. One man a few feet away already has blood on his knuckles, dark against the frost. Your job is simple. Swing, break, lift, dump. Repeat over and over until the bell rings or someone collapses, or both. There's no real quota, but pretending there is keeps you moving. The guards don't care about production. They care about motion. Standing still makes them twitchy. And twitchy guards have itchy fingers. The cold isn't just a background condition, it's an active predator. It's not the kind that pinches your cheeks and makes you sigh into your scarf. It's the kind that steals heat from your bones, minute by minute. You learn quickly that sweat is your enemy. If you sweat, your clothes freeze. If your clothes freeze, your body follows. You adapt. Work steady is not fast enough. Stay just warm enough. It's a dangerous game, and everyone plays it badly at least once. Someone nearby drops their pickaxe. It lands wrong, splitting the shaft. The guard is on them instantly. A rifle butt to the ribs. No yelling. Just mechanical violence, like brushing dirt off your coat. The man stumbles to his feet, wheezing. He'll be assigned to the punishment crew now, extra hours, less food. You haven't even noticed how hungry you are until lunchtime creeps in like a dream. A metal container is dragged out by a horse-drawn sled. Yes, a horse, ribs showing, eyes dead. Inside the container, soup again. Same as before, maybe colder. If the ladle hits something solid, the line gets excited. It's like gambling. Will it be fish? A potato chunk? Something so chewy? You get mostly broth. You drink it anyway. There's a rumour, always a rumour, that in another camp somewhere far north a prisoner once found a whole chicken foot in his soup. You all talk about that guy like he's a legend, like a hero from some ancient feast. That's the level you're operating on now. And then there's the fringe stuff, like the guy who swears he's seen a bear walking through camp at night wearing a prisoner's cap. No one believes him, but everyone wants to, because the idea of a bear escaping when you can't, that's almost comedy. Historically, not every camp was a death sentence. There were differences, some marginally better, some outright horror shows. Kolyma, where you might be now, was one of the worst. Nicknamed the Land of White Death. There's scholarly debate about whether Stalin intentionally sent prisoners to specific regions based on their category, a silent hierarchy of death probability. Some researchers argue it was more random. Others insist there was strategy. What's certain is that the machine didn't care about your innocence, guilt, or usefulness. It cared that you kept swinging that pickaxe. By late afternoon, your hands barely respond. Your knuckles feel like glass marbles shoved under your skin. You don't even know if you're bleeding. Blood freezes fast here. The wind picks up again, screaming through the mine like it's mocking you. One of the guards lights a cigarette. You can smell it from yards away, and it feels like a crime. A prisoner whispers, "I'd trade my boots for one drag." He's not joking. The bell rings. It's not melodic, more like someone banging a pot with a pipe, but it's the most beautiful sound you've ever heard. You stagger back to the sleds, loading onto them like limp dolls. The ride back is silent, everyone too tired to talk. A few eyes are closed, heads bouncing with the ride. Nobody sleeps. If you fall asleep outside, you don't wake up, you just cool down permanently. At camp, there's another meal, barely. More soup, some black bread. The bread is dense, sour and dry, but you cradle it like treasure. The old prisoner across from you offers a crust of his in exchange for a button. A button. You don't have one. He shrugs and turns away. That night you lie down on your bunk, every muscle humming with pain, feet damp, breath fogging in the dark. You think about home, about food, about fire, and then, for just a second, you think about that bear in the cap. You almost smile. Outside, the searchlight hums past the window, slowly sweeping. Tomorrow you do it all again. Your body wakes you up before the guards do. It hurts in new creative ways. Not just sore, deep, inside your bones sore, like you've been folded into origami by a bear with anger issues. You try to stretch, but you can't even lift your arms all the way. The bunks creak around you as others stir. A cough echoes, wet, raspy, like someone is trying to breathe through soup. You hear someone mutter a prayer. Or maybe it's just a word on repeat. Maybe it's their child's name. You'll never know. No one really talks in the morning. It takes too much energy to exist. The barracks are still dark when the door slams open and the cold rushes in like an insult. A guard steps in, boots leaving heavy prints on the floor, eyes scanning. "Up! Out!" he barks. No need for a second warning. Everyone moves, groaning and swaying. You don't really dress. You're already in your clothes, slept in them, worked in them, will probably be buried in them. All you do is pull your cap down and tighten the belt you made out of string and someone else's shoelace. Then you shuffle outside, lungs seizing in the frozen air. Morning lineup is like everything else here. Long, silent, cold. The guards pace, the dogs growl. And you wait while they do the daily count. Twice, because they always mess it up. One prisoner didn't get up. He's still in bed, curled around something that was once hope. 2 men are ordered to drag him out. He's not dead, yet. But his lips are blue. His breath is shallow. The guards don't care. "Put him on shovel crew," one says, as if that'll bring him back to life. You stand next to a man who hasn't spoken since you arrived. You've learned his name only from hearing it barked by guards. His nose is raw and peeling, his eyes glassy. Today he breaks protocol and whispers to you. "They took my coat. Said it was too nice." That's it. That's all he said. Then he faces forward again, as if even that short sentence cost him something he couldn't afford to spend. The camp runs on a system that isn't quite logical, but works just enough to keep you breathing. You'll notice some prisoners get better boots, some get marginally more food, others seem to float, always just barely above the worst of it. These people learned early how to trade, how to flatter, how to disappear when trouble shows up. The black market inside the camp is more alive than most of the prisoners, and it starts with language. You start picking up the slang early. Not just Russian, but Blatnoi, the coded language of the thieves. Krisha means protection. Mastirka means handmade item, like a secret knife or a hidden spoon. Kavka is food. You listen more than you speak, that's the rule. Talking too much is dangerous, but understanding, that's survival. Today you're assigned to log duty, it's worse than the mine. You're handed a dull saw and marched into the forest with 5 others. The trees are tall, brittle, covered in frost so thick it looks like sugar. Your job is simple, cut them down, drag them back, no horses this time, just you. Human horsepower, you saw in pairs, push, pull, the rhythm settles into your muscles, the blade squeals. Your hands blister. One man faints. The guard hits him with a stick until he gets up. You keep soaring. The forest is quiet in that weird, oppressive way. Like it's listening. Like it's holding its breath. There's no birdsong, no animals, just wind and pain. The other prisoner, Mikhail, you think his name is, whispers while you work. He tells you he used to be a geologist, studied volcanoes. Now I just study the weight of wood, he says. You almost laugh, and that scares you. Lunch is the same soup. Always the soup. But out here it freezes if you don't eat it fast enough. One man brings a tiny tin can in his coat to save leftovers. Someone else steals it while he's working. Fights break out over smaller things. There's a strange culture to the camps. A hierarchy. At the top, the blatnier, the professional criminals. They live by their own code, a warped sort of honour. Tattoos, swagger and teeth filed into points. You avoid eye contact with them. They don't care about politics, but they do care about status. Below them are the political prisoners, people like you, accused of speaking, thinking, existing incorrectly. Teachers, writers, clerks. Beneath that, the socially harmful elements, the orphans, the religious, the ones too broken to fight back. The blatney run the internal black market. Want a second spoon of gruel? You'll pay with a sock, a favour, or your soul. Want to avoid a work detail? Bribe a guard with something if you have anything left to give. Some prisoners trade their own teeth, literally. Gold fillings are currency now. There's an old woman in the infirmary. You hear she once traded a tin cup for a needle and thread. Now she stitches up boots and sells repairs in exchange for food. Nobody knows her real name. They call her Babushka Bones. Her hands shake, but her seams are solid. The historical records talk about the economy of scarcity in these camps like it's a phenomenon. But you live it. Every object has value. A spoon is worth a meal. A button might buy you an extra layer of felt. A splintered comb could be traded for tobacco, which in turn could be traded for warmth. It's capitalism with the morality hollowed out. There's a scholarly debate still ongoing about whether the prisoners themselves developed these economies to reclaim agency, or if it was just another method of control encouraged by the guards. Did the authorities allow the blatnier to dominate because it broke the spirit of the rest? Or was it simply the result of chaos filling a power vacuum? Some say it was engineered. Others argue it was inevitable. All you know is that it works. Barely. Back at camp, after work, you pass a guard humming a song you recognise from a childhood memory. You don't know why, but it hits hard. Your chest tightens, you keep walking. That night, your bunkmate, still silent, still skeletal, slips you something. A piece of waxed paper with writing on it. Just a few words, a name, a date, a line from a poem maybe. He doesn't explain, he just looks at you. You tuck it away, you'll think about it later. Sleep comes harder tonight. Your muscles ache, your brain is spinning. Words, numbers, bargains, codes. You feel yourself fraying at the edges, not breaking, just wearing thin, like ice before the crack. You close your eyes and hope to wake up tomorrow with all 10 fingers. That's the kind of hope that makes sense now. The wind punches the door open before the guard does. You're up before he even yells. That's how fast habits form out here. Day 4, and already you're rising like clockwork to the sound of nothing but freezing air and distant dogs barking at ghosts. Your breath hangs in front of you in the half-light and your boots are still wet from yesterday. You slept in them because if you didn't, someone might have taken them. Or worse, the leather might have frozen stiff. Either way, your toes are already numb. Outside the camp is blue with early light. Snow falls lightly, just enough to hide yesterday's footprints but not enough to soften the crunch of boots. You line up again, your breath joining a choir of mist rising from the shivering mob of men and women. The guard with the whistle does his usual swagger past the ranks. He's got a cigarette that never seems to go out and eyes like dull buttons. His coat looks warm. You try not to look at it too long. Head count again. Always a mess. Someone new didn't make it through the night. Word travels down the line. A heart attack maybe, or maybe just gave up and slipped away. The guards don't really check, they just drag him off like a piece of equipment that stopped working. A replacement arrives a few minutes later, fresh off the train, wearing a city coat and that wide-eyed, "What is this? Look, you wore only a few days ago." You almost feel sorry for him. Almost. Today you're assigned to brick duty. You're not making bricks, you're carrying them. From one stack to another, back and forth for hours. You try not to ask why, it's one of the camp's favourite games, meaningless labour. Move the pile from here to there, then back again. You do it because they tell you to. You do it because stopping gets you attention, and attention is never good. As you lift the bricks, your arms scream in protest. Your breath fogs and freezes on your scarf, turning it into a stiff ring of ice. You try to fall into a rhythm, step, lift, walk, drop, repeat. The ground is slippery, and once you almost fall. A guard clocks you, not with a boot this time, but with a word, lazy, and you keep moving. Your spine crackles every time you straighten up. There's a strange lesson you start to learn out here. Pain means you're still in the game. The ones who stop feeling it? They're usually the ones who stop moving not long after. It's like the body has a little flag it waves before giving up, so you embrace the ache. You tell yourself it means you're still here, still you somehow. At midday you get a break. Not a long one, just enough to squat in the snow and let your arms hang like dead branches. A man nearby pulls out a tiny wooden carving from under his coat. A bird, delicate as a whisper. He's been chipping away at it with a nail file, hiding it in his glove during work. You ask him why he risks it. He shrugs. "It reminds me I have hands," he says, "and that I can still make something." The camp has its own version of creativity, quiet, secretive, and just this side of criminal. You'll find poems scratched into wall beams, stories whispered after lights out, quote, portraits drawn with charcoal on the backs of official forms. Most of it gets destroyed if discovered, but some survives. Art is an act of rebellion here, even if no one ever sees it. There's also music, believe it or not. Not instruments, those are long gone, but voices. Soft singing at night, sometimes in Russian, sometimes in Yiddish or Ukrainian or Georgian. The songs drift out from the barracks like smoke, vanishing into the night air before they reach the fences. They're not loud enough to trigger a beating, just loud enough to remind you that not everything has been taken. But make no mistake, joy is dangerous here. A laugh too loud, a moment too free, and you're flagged. The guards don't like to see too much life in your eyes. They prefer it dulled, distant, like they want to make sure the camp has done its job properly. There's a joke whispered around the work sites, always with that dry, hollow tone. The only safe emotion in the Gulag is hunger. Everyone gets that one. Hunger is constant, acceptable, predictable. Everything else is a risk. As you trudge back to the barracks after your shift, you pass the punishment cell. It's a low, windowless shed behind the mess hall. Prisoners call it the box. Inside, it's just wood and cold, no blankets, no stove, no mercy. If you're lucky, you're only thrown in for a day. Some get a week, some never come out. Nobody makes eye contact with the box. It's like staring into a future you're trying very hard to avoid. There's always one or two prisoners who think they can game the system. Fake an injury, bribe a guard, hide during roll call. Never ends well. Deo, a young guy, barely out of his teens, is caught trying to sneak an extra slice of bread. Just one slice, not even thick. The guard who finds him doesn't shout, he just smiles, slow and tight. The boy's beaten with a belt in front of the others, not because the guard enjoys it, though maybe he does, but because that's protocol. Discipline is public, mercy is private and very, very rare. Some say the guards are the worst monsters in the camp, but others say they're prisoners too, just higher up the chain. You start to notice the ones with sunken eyes and trembling hands, the ones who drink before noon. One falls asleep on a bench and wakes up swinging. The older prisoners tell you he was a soldier once, fought in Finland. Now he counts shovels and smokes bark when the cigarettes run out. There's an ongoing debate among historians about the nature of the guards. Were they indoctrinated tools of the state? Or just opportunists riding a wave of unchecked power? Maybe both. Some were cruel for sport. Others were simply indifferent. A few, the rarest kind, looked the other way when a prisoner needed 5 more seconds. You don't trust them, but you notice them. That night you're back in the barracks. The stove is out again. You share a blanket with 2 others. There's no room to stretch out, so you sleep curled like a question mark. Someone nearby is snoring through a broken nose. You close your eyes and try to forget what your fingers feel like, bloated and raw. Before you drift off, you hear someone whisper the date. October. You count back. That means you've been here less than a week. It feels like years. You wonder how long it will take before you forget what your own voice sounds like, or your real name, or the sound of rain that isn't frozen. Then you remember the wooden bird and the quiet song, and you tell yourself you'll make it one more day. Just one more. There's a kind of survival instinct that kicks in, not dramatic, not cinematic. More like a whisper in your blood telling you what not to say, when not to look, where to step, who to avoid. It's not about being brave or clever, it's about staying uninteresting, unimportant, invisible. The Gulag doesn't like personalities. It grinds them down, files them off. But the ones who last? They're ones who learn the rules fast. Not the official rules, those are useless, but the unwritten ones. You learn quickly not to speak when the guards are in a certain mood. You learn who's safe to sit next to during meals. You learn to keep your eyes on the ground but your ears open. Because language is the closest thing you have to armour. Prison slang is a whole universe of its own. It's not just words, it's a code, a survival map, a badge of identity. The experienced ones speak it fluently. The thieves especially, the blatnier, their language is sharp, fast, full of metaphor and a menace. You hear them throw words around like fenya and shukeriat, meanings nested like matryoshka dolls. Even the guards sometimes don't understand it. That's the point. They don't use your name, nobody does. You're writer, or student, or new fish, depending on how long you've been here and what crime you supposedly committed. You stop hearing your name after a while. You stop missing it. It's easier to melt into the background when you're just that quiet one from the barrack with the bad boots. One afternoon during latrine duty, a glamorous assignment, you're paired with a guy who introduces himself only as Dim, which means smoke. He's got a tattoo on his hand of a star, the points touching his knuckles. Prison ink. He says it means he bows to no one, not even God. You don't ask what he did. You don't want to know. He doesn't ask what brought you here either. That's etiquette, but he tells you the most valuable thing in the camp isn't food or fire or even sleep. It's information. Dim teaches you how to listen without reacting, how to catch the patterns in how the guards speak, which dogs are mean for real, and which ones just bark, which guards you can bribe and which ones will report you for trying. He says, the first rule is this: don't trust anyone, but don't be seen not trusting anyone. At night, the barrack turns into a hum of whispered stories. Not happy ones. Stories of arrests, interrogations, the last time they saw their families. Some people still think they're going home soon. You keep your mouth shut. Hope is a dangerous fuel. Burn it too fast and you run out before winter even really starts. There's a man, looks like a priest, maybe was one, who recites poetry in his sleep. Long, slow verses from memory. You recognise Pushkin in the rhythm, though the words are jumbled. No one wakes him. It's almost comforting, like a strange lullaby in the dark. Another prisoner, an older woman with hands like bark, carves chess pieces out of bread, hardens them in the stove when no one's looking. She's got a full set, minus one bishop she traded for a broken razor blade. Nobody ever plays, though. It's enough to have them. Proof that someone remembers the shape of rules and imagination. You start keeping track of the different kinds of silence in the camp. There's the morning silence, tight and resigned. The work site silence, mechanical, filled with breath and steel. The punishment silence, thick and trembling. And the nighttime silence, when you lie there listening to everyone not saying what they're thinking. The camp has its own geography too. Not just the barracks and work sites, but invisible lines that run between social groups. The Blatny stick together, sharp-eyed and wiry, hoarding their influence. The political prisoners, the 58ers as they're called, keep to themselves, often better educated, mostly more confused about how the hell they ended up here. Then there are the broken ones, wandering between worlds, eyes like cracked glass. You're a 58er. Article 58, Soviet Criminal Code, Anti-Soviet Activity. A catch-all for anyone who breathed wrong in the presence of power. Someone once called Article 58 the bucket into which the state threw whoever it didn't want to look at anymore. Professors, doctors, students, peasants, it didn't matter. You all ended up here, and now you spend your days next to men who stabbed their neighbours for shoes. You overhear a man arguing that the real difference between politicals and criminals is that criminals know how to survive. Political prisoners still expect some kind of justice. That expectation gets a lot of them killed. It's not that anyone teaches you these things formally. It's like osmosis, soaked into your skin, absorbed by your eyes, stitched into your sleep. Every glance carries weight. Every slucken says something. There's an infamous word everyone whispers, usually only once. Stukach, an informant. You never know who they are. Could be your bunkmate. Could be the guy you just traded a crust of bread with. The camp thrives on paranoia because paranoia keeps people controllable. The guards reward Stukachi with small privileges, maybe a seat near the stove, maybe a lighter work day, or maybe just the pleasure of watching someone else suffer instead of them. You start to censor your own thoughts before they even form fully. You rehearse your facial expressions. When you're asked a question, you pause for just half a second longer than you normally would, just to be safe. This, you realise, is a whole second prison inside the one made of wire and wood. Historically, many prisoners came to call this internal world camp logic, a warped morality that makes sense only inside the fence. Outside, loyalty and truth mattered. In here, they'll get you killed. Or worse, moved. Transfers are terrifying. You hear stories of people transferred to camps where the average lifespan is 2 months. Some of those transfers are real, others are rumours designed to scare you. Both work. One prisoner, a gaunt woman who used to be a factory foreman, keeps a journal. Not written. There's no paper, no pen. She keeps it in her head, reciting the day to herself every night like a chant. Day 57, the fish had bones, the shovel broke, the snow fell from the roof, I didn't speak today. She's not crazy. Or if she is, she's the useful kind. There's still scholarly debate on how widespread that kind of mental record keeping was. Some memoirs say it was common. Others insist most prisoners avoided remembering anything at all. Forgetting was safer. Forgetting was survival. Memory was too sharp. But you're starting to collect fragments, phrases, faces, things you don't want to forget even as the camp tries to erase them. A joke someone told, the way the snow looked when the wind blew just right. A moment when someone gave you half their bread without speaking. You write them down in your mind, quietly. Not a journal, not a testimony, just proof that you are still here. You still have words, and as long as you have words, you're not yet gone. You learn to read people the way you used to read books, slowly, carefully, and always between the lines. The Gulag turns every interaction into a negotiation, every word into currency, and at the core of this twisted society is one of its most defining truths. You're not all equal, not even close. In here, class matters. Not money, not nobility, those mean nothing now, but social class, prisoner class. You see it in the way men stand, the way women are addressed, who eats where and who gets kicked harder when they fall. The biggest divide in the camp isn't between guards and prisoners, it's between thieves and politicals. The Blatny, the professional criminals, have their own kingdom inside the wire, complete with laws, punishments, and a brutal kind of honour system. They've done time before, they'll do time again, and they walk through the snow like they own it. Tattoos crawl up their arms and across their knuckles. Crosses on the chest mean they've never bowed to anyone. Bells on the fingers mark a thief who has done just time. And every inch of ink tells a story, sometimes a threat, sometimes a boast. You, on the other hand, are just a 58er. Article 58. Anti-Soviet behaviour, conspiracy, sabotage, take your pick. Your crime was a thought, a conversation, a joke told too loud in the wrong room. The Blatny don't care, to them you're soft. Civilian. You don't belong, and they make sure you know it. At mealtimes, the Blatny sit closer to the stove. Always. They get the first ladles of soup, often thicker, richer, occasionally even warm. If you're lucky, you sit on the outer edge of the warmth, pretending not to notice that their spoons go deeper. And if one of them wants your spot or your bread or your hat, they take it. What are you going to do? Complain? The guards aren't going to help. Half the time, the guards rely on the Blatny to keep order. It's efficient. Let the criminals rule over the politicals, like wolves herding sheep. Not just dominance, it's a full-blown system. There are invisible lines you don't cross. Bunks you don't sit on, buckets you don't use, even paths in the yard that belong to them. Violate those rules, and you might find yourself waking up without boots or teeth. One of the newcomers makes that mistake. He's a thin man with teacher's hands, delicate, a little too clean. He asks the wrong person for an extra ladle of soup, just asks. That night he gets jumped by 3 Blatny, no knives, just fists. They beat him until his face folds inward. No one steps in, everyone looks away, same as the guards. In the morning, he's gone. Move to the infirmary if you're being optimistic. Dead if you're being realistic. But here's the cruel twist. Sometimes you need the Blatnai, because they're the ones who know how to get things. A needle, a strip of cloth, a broken pen tip. Want a scrap of tobacco? A sliver of candle. They can make it happen, for a price. That price might be a favour, a secret, or something even darker. And once you're in debt to them, you're in deep. You become part of their game whether you want to or not. Still you learn the codes. You learn to nod just right. Respectful, but not submissive. You learn to give way in the snow with a glance, not a flinch. You don't ask questions, you don't answer them either. That kind of discretion earns you neutrality, which is the closest thing to safety. One woman in your barracks has navigated the divide better than anyone. Her name's Yelena. Tough, wiry, eyes sharp as glass. She used to be a nurse or a revolutionary, or both, depending on which version of her story you hear. The Blatney leave her alone. So do the guards. She doesn't speak much, but when she does, people listen. Some say she stitched up a guard once, saved his life during a riot. Others say she poisoned another. Either way, she has power. And in the Gulag, power is as rare as firewood. One night she sits near the stove sewing up a torn coat. You pass her on your way to your bunk and she speaks without looking up. Keep your mouth shut and your hands busy. That's how you live. It's not advice. It's a command. You nod, then move on. The guards play their own part in this hierarchy. They let the Blatnier enforce camp discipline, sometimes even give them tools to do it. For the guards, it's about managing numbers, hitting quotas, avoiding paperwork. If a few prisoners disappear, that's fine so long as it doesn't cause a scene. If the thieves keep the politicals in line, that's a bonus. Fewer beatings they have to deliver themselves. There's an ongoing academic argument, still unresolved, about whether this system was deliberate policy or just evolution. Some say the Soviet penal structure encouraged the Blatny to dominate the politicals, knowing it would break their will faster. Others believe it was more spontaneous, natural selection in captivity. But when you live inside it, there's no debate. It feels intentional, calculated, like someone engineered this cruelty with a ruler and a red pen. The only real moments of cross-class unity come during work. Shared labour, shared suffering. Hauling logs, digging turquoise, unloaded crates of frozen fish. When your lungs are burning and your fingers are bleeding, nobody cares what law put you here. In those moments, you're just another frozen soul trying to make it to evening roll call without collapsing. There are also the in-betweeners, those who don't quite belong to any class, the mentally ill, the broken, the ones who came in loud and defiant and now sit quietly, muttering to themselves. No one knows what to do with them. They drift from group to group, borrowing scraps of food and warmth like beggars at a banquet of starvation. One of them is called Pyotr. No one knows what he did, but he talks about trains in his sleep. Every night, like clockwork, trains late today. Tracks are iced, must salt the junction. Over and over. He once tried to give a guard a flower made of straw. The guard broke his nose for it. Now Pyotr's face leans slightly to the left and nobody tries to fix it. You don't pity him. You envy him a little. Because at least Pyotr's already left the world behind. He lives in a dream where schedules matter and flowers still grow. The rest of you are stuck in this waking nightmare with your minds fully intact and nowhere safe to put them. As you lie down, that night, a thin wind whistles through the gaps in the barrack walls. You pull your blanket tighter. The wooden bunk beneath you groans with every breath. Someone farts, and a few quiet chuckles ripple through the dark. Even here, even now, someone still laughs. It's not much, but it's a reminder that you're still a human being. For now. Morning doesn't really arrive, it just seeps in, grey and directionless, like the light forgot what it's supposed to be doing. You're awake before it happens, as usual, not because you slept well, but because sleep is slippery now, thin, brittle, always cracking under the weight of pain or cold or someone snoring. The guard doesn't even have to bang the door this time. Everyone's already up, fumbling for boots, wrapping their limbs in layers that feel more like ritual than warmth. You're no longer surprised that your fingertips are numb before you even get outside. Today's assignment is posted on a plank nailed to the barrack wall. The paper is curled, stained with grease or maybe blood, you don't ask which. Your number is there, scratched in blocky red pencil. Next to it, Worksite 17, excavation crew. You've heard of 17? Everyone has. It's not so much a place as a sentence. You line up with the other poor souls assigned there. Some old-timers mutter prayers. One man throws up quietly in the snow and wipes his mouth on his sleeve. A few guards come around handing out tools, shovels with splintered handles, pickaxes dulled to uselessness. You grab what you're given and hope the head doesn't snap off mid-swing. The walk to Worksite 17 is long. You trudge through a landscape that feels like the wrong side of the moon. Icy, windswept, marked only by crooked posts and the occasional half-buried barbed wire fence. Every few hundred metres there's a wooden cross poking out of the snow. Some are tilted, some snapped in half. You don't ask, everyone knows what they mark. When you finally arrive, you see it, a shallow valley filled with half-dug trenches and piles of earth frozen solid. The assignment is simple: keep digging, doesn't matter what or why or where to. The earth is like iron. Your shovel bounces off it at first. You hack at it with the pickaxe until something gives. It takes minutes just to scrape a few inches. No one explains what you're looking for, maybe a foundation for some future barrack, maybe nothing at all. You start to understand what people mean when they talk about labour that eats the soul. It's not just exhausting, it's pointless. There's no end goal, no finished product, no sense that what you're doing matters in any way. You're moving earth that will freeze again tomorrow for a building that may never exist. And you're doing it not because it needs to be done, but because you need to be broken. A man next to you mutters through clenched teeth. His hands are bleeding. The shovel he's using has no handle, just a splintered stump wrapped in wire. 4 months of this, he whispers, and my own mother wouldn't recognise me. Hours pass. The sun pretends to rise, then starts sinking again. The work doesn't stop. There's no bell, no whistle, just the slow rotation of guards and the dull ache that spreads from your shoulders down into your hips and knees. Someone drops to the ground and doesn't get back up. 2 prisoners drag him to the side without speaking. The guards don't react. Lunch, if you can call it that, is delivered in a dented canister pulled by a sled. The soup today is somehow even more watery than usual. You get a ladle full of warm broth and a piece of bread the size of your palm. You wolf it down not because you think it'll help, but because your body still remembers what food is supposed to be. One prisoner doesn't get any. His number was crossed off by mistake. He argues quietly, then desperately, and then a guard shoves him into the snow. The other prisoners go silent. When he stands, his face is pale. You watch him walk back to his trench, shoulders slumped. You know he's not going to last long. There's a fringe story that floats around the camp like a ghost, about a camp in the Far East where prisoners were forced to build a road into the wilderness, a road to nowhere. The legend says that once they reached the end, the guards made them turn around and build it back the other way, over the same ground, again and again. No destination, just motion. You believe it. That kind of madness feels possible now. Academics argue over whether the Gulag's labour was ever economically productive. Some insist it was purely punitive, designed to grind down perceived enemies of the state. Others say that even the worst camps contributed something: mined ore, harvested timber, built railroads. The truth? Probably both. But on a day like today, with your body screaming and your mind running out of distractions, it feels like the only thing being produced here is suffering. The weird part? Some prisoners throw themselves into the work. You see a man swinging his pickaxe with near maniacal energy. Teeth bared, eyes wild. He doesn't slow down even when the guard walks away. You don't ask why. Maybe he's trying to stay warm. Maybe he thinks productivity will earn him a transfer. Maybe he just wants to forget where he is for a few seconds at a time. Eventually, the work stops. Not because anyone says so, but because people start collapsing. You haul your tool back to the sled and fall in line for the walk back. Every step feels heavier than the last. You can barely lift your feet. Back at camp, the air smells like smoke and human waste. You stagger into the barracks and sit on your bunk without speaking. Your hands are raw. Your knees feel like they've been replaced with hot gravel. Someone passes a cup of hot water around, just water, but it feels like a miracle. You take a sip and feel the steam creep into your throat. You nearly cry. You don't. That's a luxury. That night, someone tells a story about a man who once escaped from a camp like this, made it 50 miles through snow and forest, ate tree bark, boiled leather, survived on frozen berries, then got caught because he lit a fire to warm his hands. They found him by the smoke. No one's sure if it's true, but everyone listens like it is, because the idea of leaving still matters, even if it's just a bedtime story for grown adults rotting in a human warehouse. You lie down, sore beyond words. You can't feel your feet, but you wiggle them out of habit, just to make sure they're still there. The bunk creaks, someone coughs blood into a rag, someone else starts humming a lullaby, low, rhythmic, not quite in tune. You stare at the ceiling and think about the hole you dug today, just a trench in the ground, nothing more, and yet somehow it felt like digging your own grave in slow motion. You fall asleep holding that thought like a pillow. You think about food more than anything else, not freedom, not warmth, not even survival. Just food. Thick brown rye bread with a hard crust and steam rising from the centre. Boiled potatoes slathered in butter. A fried egg so yellow it hurts your eyes. It's not daydreaming anymore, it's obsession. You wake up thinking about it. You work thinking about it. You fall asleep chewing invisible food behind your teeth like a starving ghost. Hunger doesn't come and go. It's a second skeleton inside you now, rattling with every step. The camp diet is a masterpiece of misery. 3 meals a day in theory. In practice, 1 ladle of soup per shift, sometimes 2, 1 slice of black bread per day. The bread is the main event, dense, sour, chewy, made with mystery ingredients you try not to think about. Sawdust, some say. Mould, say others. Doesn't matter. You eat every crumb like it's treasure. There's no table manners in the Gulag. Just instincts. The worst part, your food isn't based on your hunger. It's based on your output. There's an actual calorie quota system, a bureaucratic nightmare dressed up as a science experiment. If you hit your work quota, move enough rocks, dig enough dirt, you get the full ration, maybe 200 to some 300 calories. Miss it, and your portion shrinks. Miss it again, and it shrinks more. Eventually it drops to starvation levels, barely enough to keep your heart ticking, and then your body starts eating itself. It's a vicious cycle. You're too weak to meet the quota because you're underfed, but you don't get more food unless you meet the quota. So you work harder, break faster, fall deeper. No one can beat it forever. Even the strongest start to fade. You've seen it happen. Big men reduced to scarecrows in a month. Muscles gone, eyes dull. Minds blank. One man, tall, heavy-set, used to laugh at everything. Called himself the camp minister of mirth. Said he'd eat the guards before he starved. You watched him wither. Now he sits in a corner rocking back and forth, chewing on his own sleeve. The guards let him be. They know how this ends. There's a blackboard in the mess hall. Every day the supervisors write down the names of those who exceeded quota. They're rewarded with praise and a slightly thicker piece of bread. Maybe a teaspoon of sugar. Sometimes just an extra boiled potato. That's enough to spark jealousy so sharp it cuts. Some prisoners try to sabotage each other just to improve their own chances. Hide tools, switch wheelbarrows, spill rocks on purpose. You catch yourself doing the math one day. If you eat your whole ration, you might have just enough energy to finish the dig. If you finish the dig, you get the same ration again tomorrow. But what if you save some of your bread? Hide it, trade it, risk it. But what if someone sees? What if it gets stolen? What if you get accused of hoarding and thrown into the punishment box? There's an entire underworld built around food. The Blatnier, of course, control most of it. They bribe guards for smuggled goods, salted fish, hard biscuits, even cigarettes that can be eaten in emergencies. They trade these for favours, loyalty, labour. Some guards participate directly, trading meat scraps from their own kitchen in exchange for stolen prisoner supplies. A piece of sausage can buy a shirt. A cup of flour can buy silence. You learn that the term kasha doesn't always mean porridge. Sometimes it's code for any hot food, real food. There are rumours of underground stoves dug out beneath the barracks and disguised with floorboards. The guards know, but they pretend not to so long as the heat doesn't cause fires and the smoke doesn't rise. You hear of one such stove on the far edge of camp where a group of women boil pine needles into tea, not for the taste, for the vitamin C. It staves off scurvy for a few extra weeks. You consider trying to find it, but the risk is high. Getting caught with the second fire source is serious. Sabotage, they call it. Sentence extension. Or worse. The stories get weirder. One man swears he saw someone cook a rat over a smuggled match. Ate it whole, bones and all. Another tells you about a prisoner who scraped grease off a machine part and fried breadcrumbs in it. You almost salivate at the thought. Then there's the darker whispers, about men who disappear during long shifts in the forest, about crews who come back one person lighter, looking too well fed. You don't want to believe those stories. You really don't. But when you see someone with a belly not quite as hollow as the rest, it's hard not to wonder. There's a constant debate among prisoners, quiet, cautious, half-spoken, about what keeps a man alive longer, hope or strategy. The hopeful ones talk about letters from home, about early release, about the next shipment of flour. The strategists focus on calories. They count them like monks count beads. How many you burn, how many you store, how many you can steal. Some even take pride in their ration math, as if outwitting starvation is a sport. There's a scholar in your barrack who used to teach mathematics. He still does equations in the air with his finger. Now he calculates his daily energy balance with absurd precision. He shows you his notes once, scratched into the underside of a bunk with a nail. 800 kilocalories burned per labour shift. 900 kilocalories consumed today, surplus equals 100 kilocalories. He grins like he's won the lottery. You want to tell him he's already in debt. His cheeks are hollow and his hands shake, but you don't. You find yourself developing rituals around your bread. You hold it before eating it, smell it, even hide a tiny crumb to chew on later in the dark. There's an art to eating slowly. You learn to let a single bite dissolve under your tongue like candy. One prisoner smears dirt on the outside of his bread to keep others from stealing it. Another hides it in a cloth under his armpit. That man ends up with an infection, but he still thinks it was worth it. The camp doctor, if you can call him that, says the worst sign isn't the weight loss. It's the apathy. When a prisoner stops caring about food, it's over. He calls it the hunger threshold. Once crossed, it's like a switch flips. The body starts conserving energy by shutting down the mind. You've seen it. The blank eyes, the limp limbs, the slow staggering walk of someone already fading. Tonight you eat your bread slowly. One bite at a time, you tuck the last crumb into your shirt. A gift for tomorrow. Or the next time you feel like collapsing. It's not much, but in the Gulag, even a crumb is a kind of power. A protest against the machine. Proof that you're still fighting. You lick your fingers in the dark. Then you lie back, belly hollow, but heart just full enough to make it to tomorrow. The cold doesn't care how long you've been here. It doesn't care what you did, what you didn't do, or what your body's already endured. It's not something you fight anymore. It's something you learn to outsmart. You don't conquer it. You negotiate with it. Because out here, warmth is a currency, a skill, and a very personal kind of war. You wake up with your face stuck to the blanket. Literally. Moisture from your breath has frozen the wool to your cheek. Peeling it off takes skin. You grunt softly and someone across the bunk rolls over with a groan. Nobody complains loudly anymore. It's wasted energy. You just move through the motions like you're already half a ghost. There's a trick to staying warm, and everyone has their version of it. Some sleep in fetal position, knees tucked to chest, conserving heat like an instinctual equation. Others layer scraps of fabric in places that matter most. Armpits, lower back, groin, behind the knees. A rolled up rag in your waistband could mean the difference between frostbite and just another miserable day. You've learned to stuff your boots with hay when you can find it. It smells like wet dog, but at least it keeps your toes attached. Fire is rare and you never count on it. Each barracks has a stove, but wood is rationed tightly, if it comes at all. Some nights a guard will toss in a log as a favour. Others, nothing. You all sit in your bunks, watching the metal stove like it's a dying star, praying for it to radiate just a little longer. Sometimes prisoners sneak into the work zone just to steal bark or splinters from felled trees. It's a dangerous game, get caught with contraband wood, and it's a week in the punishment box. Maybe 2, you learn to generate heat with movement, subtle, continuous, deliberate. Flex your toes, bounce your legs under the blanket. Wiggle your fingers until they sting. Some prisoners hum quietly through clenched teeth, using vibration to chase off the chill. It sounds ridiculous, but out here, nothing's too small to be sacred. Once you saw a man wrap himself in newspaper pages he found stuffed in a trash bin behind the guard post. Soviet propaganda became insulation. He lasted 2 extra weeks before his legs went numb. You also start memorising heat spots, the places where warm air leaks out of the system just enough to be useful. The patch near the kitchen vent, the corner in the latrine where steam sometimes rises from below, the tiny bit of warmth that seeps through the floorboards above the punishment shed. You've seen 2 grown men nearly come to blows over who gets to sit next to a wall warmed by the back of a generator. There's an underground economy in warmth too. Socks are traded like diamonds. A prisoner with a spare scarf holds power. You once saw a man barter away half his soup ration for a single wool mitten. Not a pair, just one. He said he needed it for his writing hand. Some prisoners, the real veterans, even make heat packs. They fill fabric with sand or ash, then warm them briefly by the stove and stuff them into their shirts. They don't stay hot for long, but even 10 minutes of relief is worth it. You tried to make one once, but your fingers were too stiff to tie the knot. There's a woman in your barracks named Marina. She's missing 2 toes, but still manages to scrounge up warmth in places no one else can. People call her Kamin, the fireplace. It's a joke, kind of. She has a stash of coal dust somewhere, nobody knows where. She uses it to build tiny fires inside tin cans, burns them just long enough to warm her hands. You caught her doing it once under her bunk, flame flickering blue like a secret. She saw you see it. Didn't speak, just nodded once, the kind of nod that means, tell no one or freeze. Even the guards hate the cold. You see it in their faces, their cracked lips, their short tempers. Their coats are thicker, yes, and they have gloves, real gloves, not socks with holes in them tied off at the wrist. But cold seeps in eventually. You watch one guard warm his hands on a prisoner's breath once, laughing while he did it. A weird moment, half cruelty, half shared suffering. The line is blurry out here. There's debate in the scholarly world about how intentionally the Soviet camp system weaponized the cold. Some argue it was just geography. Bad luck that these camps were built in some of the most punishing climates on Earth. Others say it was strategic, that the isolation, the winter, the endless snow were part of the punishment. That Mother Russia herself became a warden. You don't need an academic to tell you what you already feel in your marrow. The cold wants you gone. The seasonal shifts are brutal. Winter is long and merciless, but spring doesn't bring relief. It brings mud, rot, flooding. Summer brings mosquitoes thick enough to darken the air, feasting on every inch of exposed skin. But winter? Winter is when the camp gets quiet. The jokes die. The singing stops. Frost forms inside the barrack, clinging to the walls like ivy. You wake up with ice in your eyebrows. There's a fringe story about a prisoner who figured out how to heat his boots by lining them with crushed aspirin. Nobody knows if it worked, or if it burned his feet clean off. The story changes every time it's told, but people listen, mouths slightly open, as if hope might hide somewhere in the details. One man shares his own warmth trick. He urinates on a rock, then wraps it in cloth and puts it near his stomach. You laugh, then you try it. And it works. For 20 minutes you feel human. Eventually you develop a tolerance. Or maybe it's just resignation. You no longer curse the cold. You greet it like an old enemy. You brace for it, accept it. You know how to position your body on the bunk to avoid direct drafts. You know how to press your hands between your thighs for a pulse of heat. You know to keep moving, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. And you know, more than anything, that cold is the Gulag's favourite tool. Not a bullet, not a beating, just slow, silent, inescapable cold. Tonight, you sleep in your clothes, boots on, hat low, hands tucked into your armpits. You curl around the body next to you without a word. You don't know his name, he doesn't know yours, but together you build just enough warmth to see the night through. You're not warm, but you're not dead. And in the Gulag, that's the difference between a statistic and a survivor. It starts with a cough. You've heard it before, wet, rattling, deep in someone's chest like it's dragging up gravel. But this time it's yours. You try to muffle it in your sleeve, but it tears out anyway, and a few heads in the barrack turn before looking away just as fast. You know what they're thinking. One more body closer to open space on the bunk. Getting sick in the Gulag isn't a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And when it happens, you're not looking at recovery. You're looking at triage without tools, care without compassion, and a system built on the idea that your expiration date is flexible but not far off. There's no real hospital, no nurses with clean hands, no medicine unless someone smuggled it in from somewhere. The infirmary is a wooden shack slightly less drafty than your barrack, staffed by one prisoner who used to be a veterinarian. If you're lucky. Some camps just have a guy with glasses and a list. Still, you don't want to go there. You'd rather cough blood into your shirt and keep digging ditches than end up in that place. Why? Because being labelled too sick to work doesn't buy you rest. It paints a target on your back. You stop being useful, you start being a burden, and burdens don't get soup. Today you're still walking. Barely. Your joints feel filled with glass, your nose runs like a cracked faucet, but you show up at lineup, eyes blurry because the alternative is worse. You think about asking for a rest day. Then you remember what happened to the last guy who did that. He ended up unloading rocks with a broken hand. You keep your mouth shut. You're sent to the timber lot. hauling logs bigger than you are, across frozen ground. The bark scrapes your hands raw. Every time you bend down, your ribs ache like something inside is tearing loose. You lose your balance once and nearly get crushed by a rolling trunk. A guard laughs. You keep moving. There's an older man on your team today. He's wheezing with every breath, but still lifting logs like he's made of wire and spite. He tells you to wrap cloth around your chest, tight. Keeps your lungs from shivering too much, and you do it, and the pressure helps you a little. At least it feels like you're holding your insides together. At break, someone gives you a piece of burnt bread crust. Not because they like you, because they know you're one cough away from collapsing, and a dead man is a poor work partner. You chew slowly. It's dry and bitter, but warm enough from the sun to feel like mercy. Back at camp that evening, you finally cave and sneak into the infirmary after dark. You lie. Say you just want to wash a cut. The man inside, the doctor, looks up from his bunk with a face so hollow it seems sculpted. He squints, snorts, and waves you in. There's no soap, just a basin of filthy water and a rag that smells like onions. He asks, "Fever?" You nod. "Cough?" You nod again. He doesn't take your pulse, he just studies your face like it's a math problem he's already failed. Then he says, "Don't let them see you like this. Sleep it off, or don't. That's your treatment." In the corner of the infirmary, 3 other prisoners lie on cots. One is unconscious. One is shivering so hard the bunk rattles. One is dead. You know he's dead because no one's covered him, just lying there, mouth open, eyes staring at the ceiling, as if still hoping for warmth. Nobody reacts. Death here is like the snow, always present, rarely surprising. There's an ongoing academic debate about the health conditions in Gulag camps. Some records suggest the authorities tried to maintain basic hygiene and care. Others argue it was all propaganda. Prisoner accounts overwhelmingly paint a picture of intentional neglect. There are stories of bandages made from shirt sleeves, wounds rinsed with vodka if it was available, surgeries performed with kitchen knives, antibiotics, only for the guards. You remember someone once saying that every man in the Gulag gets 3 illnesses: hunger, cold, and infection. Most don't make it past the 3rd. Back in the barrack, you cough again. This time you taste iron. Your neighbour shifts away from you, not rudely, just strategically. You can't blame him. There are no masks, no hand-washing stations, no quarantine procedures. Illness moves through the barracks like wind. You've watched entire work crews shrink by half in a week. There's a myth that goes around, especially among the newcomers, that if you get just sick enough, they'll release you. That Moscow has some law protecting the truly ill. That you'll be sent south to a sanatorium, maybe even home. It's nonsense, of course. Wishful thinking wrapped in desperation. But it circulates anyway, passed between prisoners like a good luck charm. One night, a man fakes pneumonia, shivers on command, coughs with a flare. The guards drag him to the infirmary, then forget about him. When he's found a week later, he's frozen solid. The stove had gone out. No one relit it. The only thing left warm was his lie. Still, you cling to the illusion of health. You tie rags around your hands to hide your swollen knuckles. You splash melted snow on your face to disguise the fever flush. You stand a little straighter when the guards pass. You force yourself to eat, even when your stomach revolts. The longer you fake strength, the longer you live. There are fringe survival strategies too. Some prisoners chew pine bark, says it helps with inflammation. Others swear by a tea made from lichen and boot leather. You see one man rubbing garlic on his chest. Where he got garlic, no one knows. Maybe traded it for a blanket. Maybe stole it from the guards. Maybe it's not garlic at all. You start sleeping sitting up, hoping it'll help your lungs. It doesn't. You start talking to your body like it's a stubborn mule. Just keep going, you whisper. One more day. Then one more after that. Sometimes your body listens, sometimes it doesn't. And yet people survive. Not all. Not most, but some, somehow. Against logic, against biology. You watch a woman with a hacking cough carry her work quota, and then sing under her breath that night. You see a man with an ulcer so bad he vomits blood and still shows up to shovel coal. They say you survived by accident in the Gulag. Maybe, but you're starting to believe there's more to it. A kind of slow rebellion. A refusal to go quietly, a silent, grinding will that hums beneath the weakness and the coughing and the rot. You're part of that now, whether you want to be or not. So you cough. You ache. You wrap your shirt tighter around your ribs and try not to look too sick. Not yet. Not until you've made it one more day. They call it fartsa, the shadow economy, the barter network, the black market of the Gulag. Not that anyone uses the word openly. You wouldn't dare. But the thing itself, oh, it's everywhere. It lives in corners, behind backs, under mattresses, and between ribs. It's the only thing more reliable than frostbite. And if you want to survive in this place, you don't just work or dig or carry, you trade. The Gulag doesn't give you what you need. That's the first rule. The second rule, someone else has what you need. The third, they want something in return. It might be food, it might be warmth, it might be pain. And if you're smart or desperate, you'll find something to offer back. That's the real labour out here. Everything else is just theatre. It starts small, a button from your coat for half a cigarette, a strip of gauze for a bent spoon, a nail sharpened into a blade in exchange for 2 sips of sugar tea. Then it spirals into something bigger, webs of exchange, favours stacked like bricks. A silent ledger passed between the hollow-eyed and frostbitten. Nothing is free, nothing is safe, but everything is available if you know who to ask. Today you're trying to patch a hole in your boot. You've stuffed it with straw and tied it with twine, but it won't hold. The cold seeps in. The skin of your foot is starting to turn colour. Dark, unnatural. You need something, cloth, rubber, leather, anything before the toes go black. You ask around quietly. Not too loud. Loud gets attention. Attention gets you searched. The name you're given is Anton the Fish. You find him near the laundry line, squatting beside a pile of rags that might once have been uniforms. He's lean, older than you, with one eye slightly shut and a permanent smirk carved into his face like he knows every secret in the camp, and most of the ones in Moscow too. You offer him a bar of soap, pilfered from a guard's discarded mess kit 2 days ago. Still has a bit of scent. Anton lifts it, sniffs it, snorts. Smells like hope, rare. Then he pulls from his coat a strip of old canvas, stiff but usable. Take it, he says, but I'll come back for a favour. That's the part that matters, the unspoken clause in every transaction. Favours are the currency behind the currency. Someone gives you something today, they own a piece of your tomorrow. That canvas patch will cost you. Maybe a lookout during a contraband delivery, maybe silence during a fight, maybe just standing in the cold so someone else can sit near the stove. It's not always clear. That's the game. There's a saying in the camp, the black market is the only market. Official rations won't keep you alive. Official supplies fall apart in a week. If you want your coat mended, your boots sealed, your soup thicker, you need to deal. And in the middle of it all is the black market's holy grail. Cigarettes. They're not just for smoking. Cigarettes are cash. 1 cigarette can get you an extra slice of bread. 5 can buy you a new spoon. A whole pack? That could be a week off hard labour, if you offer it to the right guard. You don't smoke yourself, but you've held on to 3 stubs in a sock hidden under your bunk. They're crushed and stale, but to someone out there, they're gold. Then there's tea, real or fake, it doesn't matter. Even hot water poured over pine needles is valuable if you can pass it off. Sugar is a miracle, salt is life. Meat, of course, is mythological. You heard a guy once trade a raw onion for a pair of socks. He cried after, probably from joy, maybe from the onion. And it's not just food or warmth. Skills get traded too. If you can sew, you're golden. If you can sharpen a knife, you're respected. If you can forge signatures or memorize numbers, you're practically a king. One woman can mimic the camp commander's voice perfectly. She uses it to stage pranks and to earn favours. Someone once gave her a boiled egg for 3 words over a loud whisper. You weren't there, but the story lives on. The guards know it all goes on, of course. Some of them participate directly. Others turn a blind eye in exchange for a cut. There's a guard nicknamed Oi. Pocket. He's got one rule, slip something into his coat pocket, and you can smuggle whatever you want past him. He never looks, never speaks, but if his pocket's empty when you pass, you're in trouble. There's scholarly debate about how the Gulag black market compared to other wartime or prison economies. Some say it was more advanced, closer to a fully functioning microeconomy than a typical barter system. Others argue it was just desperate chaos. But inside the fence it feels organised, organic, brutal but strangely fair in its own crooked way. You once watched a man trade a short story handwritten on toilet paper for a piece of cheese. Not much cheese either, just enough to smell. The story wasn't even good, but the buyer. He said he hadn't read anything new in a year, called it worth every crumb, then he cried while chewing. There's also the dark side, always, theft of course, and double deals. But the worst is when something vanishes. A stash of bread, a hidden spoon, a carefully saved scrap of wool. You look around, but you never accuse, Because if you point a finger and you're wrong, or worse, right, you might not wake up the next morning. One man disappeared after accusing another of stealing his ration. The next day, his bunk was empty. The guards claimed he was transferred. But everyone knows transfer is code for the snow swallowed him. You've started keeping your few valuable items in different places. One cigarette in your boot, one under your bunk, one inside the lining of your coat. It's not paranoia, it's common sense, like diversifying assets, but with slightly more frostbite. And through all of it, you start to learn something strange. That even in this hell, trade is a kind of language. It says, I'm still human. It says, you have something I want, I have something to offer. It builds small bridges between people who would otherwise only see hunger and fear. It's not kindness, it's not charity, but it's still connection, and that matters. You fall asleep that night with your foot wrapped in Anton's canvas and a cigarette stub hidden under your chin. The wind rattles the boards. Someone whispers a joke about trading their soul for a boiled potato. Someone else says, too late, I already did. You don't laugh, but you don't cry either. You just close your eyes and dream of strange marketplaces, where value shifts with the wind and survival is just another deal waiting to be made. It's the eyes that give them away, not the guards, the informants. You learn to read them eventually. It's a different kind of stare, too casual, too still, lingering on conversations a little too long, never quite joining, never quite looking away. They're the ones who seem too clean, too well fed, or too safe, the ones who never get sent to the worst shifts, the ones who always seem to be nearby when someone slips up, and always mysteriously absent when the punishment arrives. You don't talk near them, you don't eat near them. You don't even think too loudly when they're in the room, because out here in the kingdom of wire and snow, silence isn't just golden, it's armour. Trust is the first thing the Gulag strips from you, and it does it with surgical precision. It sets up a world where anyone could be reporting on you. Your bunkmate, your work partner, even your friend, especially your friend. The smarter ones don't ask questions, the smarter ones don't answer them either. Every conversation is an audition, every nod a possible betrayal. The guards don't need to do much really, the system polices itself. The threat of punishment does the heavy lifting, but the real genius, the real cruelty, is how they weaponize your neighbours. A man offers you a sip of tea, and a week later you're being questioned about where you got it. The woman who once stitched your sleeve now walks freely while others freeze, and you realise, this isn't random, it's design. The camp is full of rumours about Stukachi, the informants. Some volunteer for extra food, others are coerced. Some don't even know they've become one until they're handed a pencil and a slip of paper. Just write what you've heard, a guard might say. Just a note, just a list of names. It's nothing really. One man in your barrack, nervous, always looking over his shoulder, gets dragged out after someone rats him out for whispering something unpatriotic in his sleep. In his sleep. Nobody defends him, nobody even blinks. By morning he's gone. Transferred, they say. You've heard that before. The Whisper network operates alongside the black market. It's its dark twin. Information is passed like contraband, subtle, coded virus. The man with the crooked tooth near the fence, informant. The girl in the laundry who never gets punished, informant. The guy who always knows tomorrow's work schedule before it's posted, probably, maybe, possibly not. That's the real horror, you never know. One afternoon a guard pulls you aside during the work shift. He's quiet, almost polite. He says, "You seem observant. That's a valuable trait. You ever see anything unusual?" You shake your head. He leans in. Not even someone skipping quota, hoarding food, stealing from the state. You say nothing. He smiles like he's heard this all before. Think about it. Being useful comes with benefits. You nod. Not agreement, not refusal, just a neutral nod, the kind you hope doesn't get written down. Then you return to work with a pit in your stomach and the feeling that something inside you has cracked slightly, just enough for the cold to slip in deeper. Historically, scholars argue over how many prisoners actually informed on others. Some say it was only a small percentage, coerced or blackmailed. Others believe the system encouraged informants on such a scale that every camp had a network thick as frost. Either way, the result was the same. Suspicion became the default. Paranoia wasn't a flaw, it was survival. Some prisoners tried to create their own codes. ways to communicate under the radar. Finger taps, prearranged glances, shared phrases that meant nothing to anyone else. You see two men argue over a chess move in the mess hall. Their voices tense, but the argument is fake. It's a cover for something else. Maybe a warning, maybe a deal, maybe a goodbye. There are a few who break under the pressure. One woman starts accusing everyone, says the dog is an informant, claims the son is spying on her. She gets locked in isolation for hysteria. You never see her again. Then there are the sleepers, the ones who inform but not for bread or warmth. The true believers, the ones who think the system works, who see their role as patriotic. They smile when they report. They sleep well after. These are the most dangerous of all. You can't bribe them, you can't outmaneuver them. They don't want favours, they want purity. One day a new prisoner arrives in your work detail. Young, fresh-faced, still smells like the city. Says he's here by mistake. Of course he is. We all are. But he asks too many questions. What time do the guards rotate? Who's in charge of the kitchen deliveries? Where do they keep the spare tools? You don't answer. Nobody does. He smiles too much. His hands are too clean. Within a week, 3 prisoners from your crew are reassigned to the mines. The bad mines. The ones no one comes back from. You learn to let silences bloom. To speak in shrugs and gestures. A blank expression becomes your shield. You speak when you have to, and only then with words that mean nothing. When someone asks your opinion, you say, I don't have one. When someone asks who said what, you say, I didn't hear. When someone asks if you saw anything, you say, only the snow. It's lonely, yes, but loneliness is less fatal than betrayal. And yet somehow, there are still friendships that form. Not many, not often, but real ones. 2 prisoners who always work side by side. A woman who sings lullabies near the stove and shares the lyrics with whoever can remember them. Bonds built on shared silence, on glances that say more than any word ever could. These connections are risky. They could cost you everything. But without them, you're just a shadow, and you're not ready to be a shadow, not yet. One night, you sit beside a man named Grisha. He used to be an actor. Says he played Hamlet once in Leningrad. Now he digs holes. He never speaks about the past unless it's cold enough for breath to freeze. He tells you a line from the play. There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it, or you nod. Then you say the first real thing you've said in days. Not thinking keeps you alive. Grisha smiles. For now. You both fall quiet. The wind outside howls like an old, sick wolf. Somewhere a guard's boots stomp across ice. Somewhere else someone is writing your name down. You hope it's for something small, you hope it's for nothing at all. But hope is a dangerous habit here, and you're trying to quit. There's a number written on the wall near the worksite. You see it every day, scratched into the frost-stained plank just above the tool rack. It changes every morning. Some days it goes up, some days down, some days it stays the same. Though that's rare. Today the number is red 164. You don't need anyone to tell you what it means. It's the quota. And here's the punchline. It never really matters what the number is. Because you're never going to reach it. None of you are. Not with the tools you have, not with the food you eat, not with the bones you work with instead of muscles. The number is fiction. A moving target designed to be just out of reach. Always just a little higher than your body can go. Always just enough to ensure you fail. Welcome to the miracle of Soviet productivity. Today's assignment is stone hauling. You line up, pick up your wheelbarrow, yours has one wobbly wheel and a cracked handle, and set off toward the rubble pile. The rock is cold, wet, heavy. You're told to move it 50 metres across the yard and stack it again. That's it, no building, no construction, just move the pile from here to there. Efficiency at its most absurd. You ask yourself again, for the 100th time, what exactly you're supposed to be producing here. The answer, if you're being honest, is exhaustion, despair, the appearance of labour. Because what matters isn't what gets done, it's that it gets done in front of someone, that it gets counted, that it looks good on paper. The work quotas are supposed to be scientific, adjusted based on task, weather, age, gender, even terrain. But they're nonsense. One size fits none. A 60-year-old woman is expected to shift the same weight as a 20-year-old man. A man with a broken rib is expected to carry as much as a man with 2 working lungs, and if you fall short, you eat less, you freeze more, and your name goes into the red ledger. The guards don't care about the numbers, not really. What they care about is who misses quota, how often, and who's watching when it happens. There's a game they like to play. Make 2 work brigades compete. Post the numbers side by side. Give the winning team a small reward, an extra herring maybe, or 5 minutes inside near the stove. It's not about the prize, it's about the tension, the mistrust, the easy resentment. You start to see how clever it all is. Keep the prisoners divided, always pushing, always measuring themselves against each other. Create enemies where there were none. The system runs itself. The guards just take notes. You remember a man from your first week, an engineer, you think. Thin, pale, wore his boots like they didn't fit. He tried to explain to a guard that the rock hauling quota was mathematically impossible. He used words like caloric expenditure and tool degradation. The guard nodded, then handed him a bigger shovel. The man lasted 2 more weeks. There's a rumour going around that Moscow has ordered a 10% increase in all quotas camp-wide. Just a rumour. But people start working faster anyway. Tripping over each other, throwing out their backs, collapsing mid-shift. The quota doesn't need to be real to do damage. It just needs to be believed. The irony, of course, is that the USSR worships productivity. The 5-year plans, the tractor output reports, the heroic factory worker posters with their sleeves rolled up and their teeth gleaming like Soviet suns. But the Gulag is where that illusion goes to die. Out here, productivity isn't measured in tons or meters, it's measured in suffering per hour. It's not about output, it's about optics. You hear a story about a camp where the prisoners were told to dig canals, huge industrial-scale channels. They worked for years with shovels and buckets, thousands of them. When the canals were finished, they flooded. The walls collapsed. The water turned to sludge, nothing was ever transported on them. But the numbers looked great on the reports. The project was called a success. Medals were awarded. That's the logic here. You didn't build a thing, but you built something, on paper. And paper is the only thing that survives. There's a scholar, long after the camps, long after the barbed wire rusted away, who writes that the Gulag turned punishment into performance, that everything was staged. That the work was theatre and the quotas were scripts. If that's true, you're an actor in the most miserable play ever written. And the audience? Maybe Moscow. Maybe no one. Maybe the ghosts of the ones who didn't make it. Today, your brigade is short 3 men. One's in the infirmary, one's in the hole. One died last night and nobody's filled the space. But the quota hasn't changed. You're expected to pick up their slack. You try. You really do. You haul your wheelbarrow until your arms feel like rubber and your back starts to spasm. You lose count of how many trips you make. 10? 15? Each one takes more out of you. At the end of the shift, the foreman tallies the numbers. The quota was 1,624 stones. Your team moved 1,380. That's a shortfall. He writes it down. He doesn't even look at you. It's not personal, just data. Back in the mess hall, the punishment is immediate. Your bread ration is thinner. The soup even more watery than usual. You eat anyway. What else can you do? Someone at the table mutters, "Next time we'll just carry the numbers and not the rocks." You almost laugh. Almost. You lie awake that night thinking about the quota. The word itself starts to lose meaning. You say it silently over and over, and it becomes strange. Quota. Quota, a fiction with real consequences, a ghost that starves you. You think about forging the numbers, about lying on the report, but someone always checks. There's always a second list, a second counter, a second set of eyes. You wonder who counts the counters, then you stop wondering. Too dangerous. As sleep creeps in, your body throbs with dull ache. Your fingers twitch with remembered strain. You dream of wheelbarrows, endless and weightless. In the dream, they never tip. In the dream, the pile is always just 1 rock away from done, but it never is, and when you wake, the number on the wall has changed again. This time it's higher. You feel the change before you see it. The mood shifts like a storm cloud rolling in, quiet at first, then suffocating. No one looks you in the eye, no one jokes in the food line. Even the thieves, normally cocky and loose-limbed, keep their hands still. You glance toward the guard post and see 2 men pulling something heavy on a sled. It's not firewood. It's not supplies. It's a box, a punishment box. Officially, they call it the Strafnoy Karcer, the penalty cell. Prisoners just call it the hole. The name fits. It's a windowless wooden shack half buried in snow, isolated from the barracks. No heat, no bedding, and barely enough room to lie down. In summer it's a furnace. In winter it's a freezer. Time slows down in there. The screams don't carry far. And the snow absorbs most of the noise anyway. You don't know who's going in today. But it doesn't matter. You've seen enough to know what comes next. A short trial, if you can call it that, some shouting, a form stamped in red ink, and then the dragging. Always the dragging. Some prisoners go quietly, already numb. Others scream and fight, but they all end up the same way. Locked in the sex with nothing but their thoughts and their teeth chattering like dice in a cup. This time it's a young man named Igor. You don't know him well, just a face you've seen during work shifts. He used to sing to himself when hauling bricks, soft and tuneless. Today he's silent. 2 guards pull him by the arms, boots scraping over ice. His lip is split. His shirt is missing buttons. No one says what he did, no one ever does. Could be stealing, could be talking, could be breathing too loudly near the wrong person. There's no warning, no final speech, just the sound of the bolt sliding into place and then nothing. He's gone. For now. The punishments in the Gulag are as varied as they are brutal. Some are quick and violent, beatings with rifle butts, fists, frozen ropes. Others are slow, methodical, designed to undo the mind more than the body. Like the hole. Like the chains. You've heard about the chains. They strap them to your ankles and make you stand for hours, sometimes days. You don't walk, you don't sit, you stand, in snow, in rain, in nothing but your prison coat. And the guards watch, not because they enjoy it necessarily, but because it's protocol. That's the word they love, protocol. Once, you saw a woman punished by being made to carry a bucket of water from one side of the yard to the other for an entire day. The bucket had a hole in it. Every trip she arrived empty. Every trip they made her go back. She cried without 2 tears. The camp has no shortage of creativity. There's the cold shift, a favourite in the winter. They strip you to your underclothes and make you stand outside for an hour, sometimes longer. You're allowed to move, but not to leave the circle marked in the snow. If you fall, they don't help you up. If you stay standing, you get to live. Maybe. Then there's dead weight duty. They give you a sack, sand, rocks, dirt, whatever, and tell you to carry it until they say stop. Could be an hour, could be 6. Once they told a man to carry a sack of wet coal until he passed out. He did. They woke him up and made him carry it again. There are debates among prisoners, among scholars, in the long stretch of years that came after, about the purpose of these punishments. Were they disciplinary? Were they symbolic? Were they arbitrary? You don't need a philosopher to tell you the truth. They were messages, loud, clear, and blood-stained. This is what happens when you forget who's in charge. The randomness is part of the design. You don't have to do anything wrong. You just have to exist incorrectly, be in the wrong place, use the wrong tone, stand too tall, smile too long. That's what keeps everyone obedient. Not rules, but uncertainty. One afternoon you're walking past the punishment shed. When the door creaks open, Igor steps out, or what's left of him. He's shaking, pale, his eyes wild and blinking against the light. 2 guards escort him like he's made of glass. He doesn't speak, doesn't look at anyone. He's led to the infirmary. He doesn't resist. His hands are trembling in a rhythm that doesn't stop even when he's out of sight. Later that night, someone whispers that he was in for 5 days. 5 days. No heat, no food after the first, water only once, no blanket, just the darkness and the cold and the walls closing in. Someone else says they heard scratching from inside the box, fingernails against wood. You wonder if that was Igor, or someone before him. You tell yourself over and over to avoid the guard's eyes, to keep your head down, to follow orders to the letter, and then 5 degrees more. But the line between obedience and punishment isn't fixed. It bends, it disappears, sometimes it wraps around your throat. One night you accidentally bump into a guard while carrying a crate of tools. He stumbles, swears, then stares at you like he's deciding something. You apologise, heart in your throat. He says nothing, just walks off. But you don't sleep that night. You wait for the knock, for the boot, for the dragging. It doesn't come, but you know it could have. That's the power of punishment in this place. It doesn't need to happen to you. It only needs to happen near you. You see someone break and you carry the echo. You feel the fear without the scars. You walk straighter, speak less, breathe quieter. There's a phrase you hear passed in hushed voices. Better the snow than the box. At least the snow is honest. It kills you fast, the box takes its time. And you wonder, quietly, privately, behind your mask of compliance, how many times a person can watch someone else suffer before they stop recognising it as suffering. Before it just becomes part of the weather. You hope you never find out. But you know you will. You don't come to the Gulag looking for love. That's not how this story works. You come to dig, to freeze, to rot, to vanish. If you're lucky, you come to survive. But somewhere between the shovels and the soup lines, something still flickers. Something small, fragile, absurd. You see it in a glance held half a second too long. A piece of bread shared without barter. A whispered joke meant for no one else. You wouldn't dare call it love. Not here. But it's something. Today, during latrine duty, you spot her again. She works in the textile shed, mending uniforms that will never be warm enough. You don't know her name, not really. Everyone just calls her Swan. She's got that kind of neck, long and curved, like she remembers what elegance felt like. She moves differently too, like she hasn't let the cold claim her posture yet. You've passed each other in silence 100 times. No words, just nods. But today she styles. It's barely there. Gone before it even lands. But it happens. You spend the rest of the day trying not to think about it. But of course, that only makes it worse. You haul timber and stack stone, your body screaming, your fingers splitting at the seams, and there she is, flashing behind your eyelids like a hallucination. It's ridiculous. It is dangerous. It's the most human thing you've felt in weeks. There are rules, of course. Dozens of them. No fraternization, no touching, no unauthorized contact between male and female prisoners. In some camps, they separate you entirely. In others, they'd let you mingle, just enough to tease at something like freedom, before snapping it away. Technically, relationships are forbidden. Realistically, they happen all the time. There's a corner near the kitchen behind the coal barrels, where couples sneak away during lunch breaks. It's not romantic. It smells like soot and rat droppings, but it's private, and that's enough. A few minutes pressed together in the dark. Whispered confessions, maybe a kiss, maybe more. Then back to the line, back to the shovel, back to pretending nothing happened. The guards know. Of course they do. Some turn a blind eye. Others use it as leverage. There's a story about a woman who got pregnant in one of the forest camps. They made her dig her own latrine in the frozen ground, then transferred her to a punishment unit for moral decay. No one ever saw her again. Another woman older, called the camp widow, tells you that once a guard offered her soap in exchange for a kiss. Just one kiss. She refused. She says it with pride. You wonder how long it took her to stop regretting it. And then there are those who take what they want. Guards with too much power and no one watching. Women pulled from the work line returned hours later with our torn clothes and blank stares. Some fight back, most don't. The thieves don't interfere, unless the victim belongs to one of them. Then it's personal, then there's blood. You hear whispers of underground weddings, not official, obviously. Just two people standing in a corner of the barrack, holding hands, making promises they can't possibly keep. A makeshift ring, carved from a spoon handle. A poem read in a whisper. One couple wrote their names inside a book cover and buried it under the fence as if that made it real. Maybe it did. Even in this place, people try to create something beautiful out of dust. You talk to Swan for the first time 2 days later. You find yourself near the sewing shed during cleanup, timing your arrival like you didn't think about it for hours. She's crouched over a pile of torn mittens, darning them with quiet focus. You ask if she has any thread to spare. She glances up, smiles that half smile again, and hands you a spool without a word. Her fingers are stained, her nails cracked, but she moves like someone who remembers music. You thank her, then leave, no more than 30 seconds, but it stays with you for the rest of the week. That's how it begins. Slow, careful, fragments of conversation, questions about the weather, jokes shared so quietly they barely make a sound. She tells you she used to dance, and you tell her you used to write. She nods like she understands both losses. Then you go back to pretending not to notice each other, for everyone else's sake. There's a line you don't cross. You don't ask about her sentence. You don't tell her yours. That's intimacy of the wrong kind. If she tells you, you can't unknow it. If you tell her, she might disappear the next day and take your story with her, so you leave that part blank. But the rest builds like a hidden campfire, tiny and illegal and worth every risk. One evening, she brushes your hand when passing you a needle. You pretend not to notice. But your pulse jumps like you just ran a mile. The next morning you save her a crust of bread. She doesn't eat it in front of you, but later you see her eyes linger just a little longer. That's enough. There's a debate among the older prisoners, the ones who've been in longer, about whether connections like this help or hurt. Some say they keep you alive, give you something to look forward to, a reason to keep walking. Others say they're dangerous. Emotional exposure in a place like this is like walking barefoot onto glass. Too easy to bleed, too easy to lose. One man tells you his wife was arrested 3 months before him. They ended up in the same camp. By accident or design, he doesn't know. For 2 years, they worked in the same zone, shared glances, even exchanged letters hidden inside work boots. Then one day she was transferred. He hasn't seen her since. He says he still writes her name in the frost on the window before he sleeps, just in case she's looking in. Back in the sewing shed, Swan tells you she's found a way to patch boots with string made from threads pulled out of old uniforms. It takes hours, but it works. She teaches you how to do it, fingers brushing yours, both of you pretending it's normal. You don't speak of love, the word doesn't belong here, but one night during the storm watch you end up on guard duty together, watching the snow pile up against the fence. It's dark, quiet, the wind screaming like something ancient. She leans against your shoulder for a second. That's all. No words, no promises, just the weight of another human being, reminding you you're still more than bone and work and silence. And then it's morning again. You part ways, return to your roles, back to your quotas, back to your hunger. But something is different now, not bigger, not safer, just there. A warmth the guards can't see, a thread of gold stitched through grey. You tuck it into your chest like a letter you'll never send, and you keep going. It starts with a scrap heap of just a corner of a torn brown paper bag blown against the fence by the wind and caught in the barbs like a flag from another life. You fish it out when the guard isn't looking, folding it carefully and slipping it inside your sleeve. It's soft, frayed, barely usable. But tonight, when everyone's asleep, you'll pull it out under your blanket and scribble on it with a piece of charcoal you saved from the stove 2 weeks ago. You'll write 3 lines, a poem, maybe a prayer, maybe both. This is what art looks like in the Gulag. It isn't bold, it isn't loud, it's quiet rebellion, a whisper against a scream. You don't make art because you have time, you don't do it because anyone asked, you do it because something inside you refuses to die quietly. You do it because if you stop creating, you've accepted that they've won. They say the Gulag was designed to erase the individual, to grind the self into a blur of numbers, labour and frost. But art doesn't cooperate with erasure. It lives in the cracks. You find it etched into the wooden beams of the latrine, scratched into the soles of boots, hidden under floorboards and stitched into the seams of shirts. You learn to look sideways, to read the world in what isn't said. There's a man in your barrack who hums symphonies in his sleep, a former violinist, you're told. He doesn't speak during the day, not anymore, but his fingers twitch like he's still holding the bow. At night, the bunk shakes with his silent orchestra, and no one dares wake him. It's the only music you hear that isn't screaming or the creak of a wheelbarrow. Another prisoner, thin as twine and missing most of his teeth, recites lines from Shakespeare in Russian. Not just the famous ones. Whole scenes. King Lear, mostly. There's something about mad kings that feels appropriate. He does it in the latrines while shoveling waste. It's absurd, it's perfect. Swan, in the textile shed, has started embroidering tiny flowers into the linings of gloves. Just 1 or 2 stitches per glove, hidden, invisible unless you know to look. She says nothing when you notice, just smiles and moves on. You never ask why, you already know, the risks are enormous. Art is contraband, it implies thinking, feeling, remembering, and those are dangerous things. A poem is not just words, it's evidence. A sketch is not just a picture. It's proof that your spirit still lives, and the system doesn't like survivors. One man gets caught carving a chess piece out of bone. The piece is beautiful, smooth, detailed, a knight mid-leap. The guards smash it underfoot and drag him out for punishment. His hand comes back in a sling. You never see him carve it again. Another woman, found with a small notebook of verses, is accused of subversion. Anti-Soviet propaganda, they call it. The verses were about trees, about memory, about her child's shoes. She's gone by morning. There's an academic theory, one of those big cold ones, that says creative expression in the camps was an evolutionary reflex, that art functioned like a psychological immune system, that it gave prisoners a structure for meaning in a place designed to erase meaning entirely. You suppose that might be true, but it doesn't feel clinical when you're scratching a haiku into the wall with a nail. It feels like keeping your soul warm. You start collecting lines, not writing them, remembering them. You carry them in your head like smuggled goods. A line from Akhmatova, a half-remembered lullaby, a joke told in the back of a coal truck. They string together inside you, slowly building a scaffolding that keeps the rest of your brain from collapsing. You meet a man who makes shadow puppets at night. Just with his hands and a rag and the flicker of firelight on the wall, Rabbits, wolves, a dancing horse. No one laughs and no one claps. They just watch, eyes wide like children again. It's only for a few minutes before the guards shut it down, but afterward, everything feels lighter. Then there's the theatre group. Yes, really. A ragtag assembly of prisoners who've cobbled together a cultural brigade. It's officially sanctioned. Sort of. Some camps allow them on the theory that morale must be managed like rations. Once a month, if the guards are in a good mood, the prisoners are allowed to perform. Not just singing and jokes, drama. Monologues, recitations, parodies of party meetings, if they're careful. There's a woman who does an impersonation of Stalin's mustache that nearly gets her sent to the hole every time. She does it anyway. Because that's who she is. You end up participating one night. You're pulled in to read a short scene, something about 2 soldiers lost in the snow. It's not much, just 5 minutes. Your voice cracks halfway through and your hands shake. But when you finish, a few people nod. One man even whispers, "That sounded like truth." You don't sleep that night. Not from fear, from something else, something warm. There are fringe stories, of course, legends about prisoners who composed entire operas in their heads, who wrote novels on scraps of birch bark, who memorised 1,000 lines of verse and passed them to other kids like treasure maps. Some say there was once a man who built a violin out of scrapwood and horsehair, that he played it at dusk once, and then smashed it himself before the guards could confiscate it. Whether it's true doesn't matter. It feels true. That's the power of story. Even the guards aren't immune. You catch one listening to a prisoner sing under his breath during work duty. The guard doesn't yell, doesn't strike, just listens for a moment, then walks away. He never says a word about it. You wonder if he remembered something. You think of swan's flowers, of the violinist's twitching hands, of the poem you scratched into the plank beneath your bunk. It wasn't a good poem. It didn't rhyme, but it was yours. A declaration of self in a place where self is supposed to dissolve. You don't expect anyone to read it. You don't need them to. You just need it to exist. That's what art is here. A flare fired into a dark sky with no guarantee of being seen, but you fire it anyway. You used to imagine the guards as monsters, faceless instruments of terror, all jackboots and snarling dogs and fists made of steel. And sure, some of them are just that, brutality into a greatcoat. But once you've been here long enough, you start seeing them differently. Not softer, not better, just complicated. They're still the enemy, but they're not always the ones writing the rules. Sometimes they're just trying to survive, same as you. This morning, during worksite lineup, one of the younger guards stumbles as he gets out of the truck. He catches himself, mutters something under his breath. You can't hear what he says, but his voice is hoarse, his face pale. You notice how his coat is threadbare at the elbows. His boots, not new, no badge of rank, no medals, just another man freezing in the wind. His name is Carsin. You've heard it before, shouted during shifts, barked through the yard. He's not the worst of them. He doesn't hit for sport, doesn't spit in your soup, doesn't leer. He just watches. Quiet. Careful, always scanning. And sometimes you think, maybe, he feels something like guilt. Not enough to quit, but enough to hesitate. You've seen him help an older prisoner to his feet once after a collapse. You've seen him step between 2 guards during an argument over a bread theft. He didn't say much, but he made them stop. And you wonder, what does that cost him? Because you know how it works here. Compassion is dangerous. It marks you, makes you a target. There are other guards, of course. The bad ones. One they call Commander Bones, for how thin he is and how easily he breaks people. Another, named Burov, who carries a length of rubber hose instead of a baton. More flexible, leaves fewer marks. He's the kind who smiles when you beg. But it's the middle ones, the grey zone guards, that unsettle you most. The ones who don't enjoy it, but still do it. The ones who look tired after a beating. Who stare too long at the barbed wire, like they're thinking about the other side of it. The ones who drink too much, too early. Who vomit behind the barracks, wipe their mouth, and go back to shouting. You hear one of them mutter, "This place eats us too," while dragging a prisoner back from the infirmary. He doesn't see you nearby, you don't say a word. There's a debate among prisoners, quiet, theoretical, like a puzzle with no right answer, about whether any of the guards are good. Can you be a decent person and still serve this machine? Does kindness count if it's occasional? Does silence make you complicit? Some say yes, others say no. Most just say, doesn't matter, guard is a guard, and it. And there's truth in that. Yeah, to me, no matter how sympathetic they look, they still have the keys. They still have the guns, and at the end of the day they go home, or at least to the warm building with vodka and meat, while you go back to a bunk with splinters in the mattress and frost inside the walls. But still, you watch them, you listen. Carson sometimes lights a cigarette during roll call and offers the end to a prisoner if no one's looking. He carries a small notebook in his coat, and once when he dropped it, you saw it fall open to a sketch. A tree, bare branches, nothing special, but drawn with care. You helped him pick it up and he nodded. That was it. But something passed between you, not trust, never trust, but a glimmer of recognition. Other guards aren't so ambiguous. One collapses in the yard after a night of drinking. Liver failure, they say. No one helps him, not even the other guards. He lies there twitching, face down in the slush, until someone finally drags him inside by his belt. You later hear he died in the medical hut, choking on his own vomit. No ceremony, just another body the camp consumes. There's a story, a strange one, maybe true, maybe not, about a guard who defected. Ran off into the forest during a prisoner transfer. Took his coat, his rifle, and a tin of salted pork. He made it 2 weeks before the dogs found him. When they dragged him back, the other guards beat him harder than they have ever beaten any prisoner. For betrayal, for weakness, for daring to cross the line even for a moment. You wonder sometimes if the guards feel trapped too, not just by the system but by each other. Like prisoners in slightly better uniforms. They don't get to question the quotas, they don't get to speak out against the beatings, and if they slip even a little, they're reported by their own. There's a term you hear whispered between the guards sometimes. Podkhod k chuzhim. Getting too close to the others. It's a warning, a boundary, a threat. Cross it, and you're no longer one of them. And no one survives long alone. But the truth is, they need you. The guards need the prisoners to keep the machine turning. If you die too fast, too many, too publicly, it reflects badly on them. Some try to balance it. Keep just enough of you alive to hit the numbers. Not out of mercy, but self-preservation. One guard, Sergeant Valinov, comes to mind. He's meticulous, obsessed with records. He once forced a man to finish his shift with a dislocated shoulder just to keep the logbooks clean. When the man collapsed, Valinov marked it as voluntary exhaustion. You asked what that meant once. He said, "It means I don't get in trouble." There are fringe rumours too about guards who secretly passed letters to families, who smuggled medicine in through fence posts, who covered for prisoners during roll call. No names, just stories. Maybe to keep hope alive. Maybe because sometimes even monsters have mothers. Tonight, during dinner, Carson walks past your table. He doesn't look at you, but he slows for half a second, just long enough for you to notice. Later, when you return to your bunk, you find a folded scrap of fabric hidden under your blanket. It's nothing much, just a patch of dry wool, but you wrap it around your feet and sleep warmer that night. You don't thank him, you don't say a word, but in the morning you make sure to stand a little straighter in line, just in case someone is watching. You've heard it said before, in hushed voices and half-jokes muttered around the stove, nature is the second warden. If the camp doesn't kill you, the land will. The difference is, the camp tortures you with intention. The land, it just is, vast, empty, indifferent, and it's everywhere. You realise this most clearly on days like today, when the wind is louder than the guards, when the trees creak like they're warning you to turn back, and when the snow isn't just cold, it's sentient. It clings to you like it wants to taste your bones. The sky is white, the ground is white. The world is white. Direction becomes a concept. Up and down blur. If the barbed wire weren't here to remind you, you wouldn't know which way is out, or if out even exists. They've assigned you to the logging crew again, deep into the forest this time, farther from the barracks than usual. The truck drops you off with 6 others and a single guard. The first thing you notice isn't the trees, it's the silence. Complete, so dense it feels like insulation. You could scream and the sound would freeze in mid-air. You start chopping, that's the job, trees marked in red get taken down. It's hard work, but it warms you up for a while. Then the sweat cools and the wind starts again, and the cold comes back twice as cruel. Your axe is dull, your gloves are damp. A man behind you slips while hauling a log and doesn't get up. The guard walks over, pokes him with the butt of his rifle, then tells 2 others to drag him under a tree. "We'll pick him up later," he says. "You keep working." The forest is like another prisoner, bigger, older, unchained. Some say it watches you. Others say that if you stare long enough, you'll see faces in the bark, hear voices in the wind. You dismiss it as cabin fever, until one day you hear laughter that doesn't belong to anyone on your crew. High-pitched, breathy, and gone too quickly. You turn, nothing but trees. There's an old man on your shift today, used to be a geographer. He tells you stories while you work, about explorers who came through these parts in the 1800s, about how the permafrost stretches hundreds of meters deep, about how bodies don't rot here, they just freeze and stay that way, preserved like meat. Somewhere in these woods, he says, are men who died with their eyes open in 1938, still staring. You believe him. Escape is a myth, of course. Everyone talks about it, especially the new ones, but the old hounds know better. You can run, sure. There's no fence in the forest, no towers once you're past the outer post, just you and a horizon that never moves. One prisoner tried it last month. Took off during latrine detail. Left everything behind, coat, boots, ration card. They found him 3 days later, less than 5 kilometers from camp. Half naked, curled under a tree, smiling. He died from exposure, but not before chewing off 3 of his fingers. Still, the dream persists. The dream of out there. Beyond the trees, beyond the snow, beyond the silence. You catch yourself imagining it sometimes, even knowing better. A road, a cabin, a hunter with a kind face. But then you wake up to the sound of wolves. Ah yes, the wolves. You hear them at night, especially when the wind dies down. Howling. Not close but not far enough. Sometimes the guards shoot into the darkness just to remind them who's boss. It doesn't work. You see paw prints near the worksite, big ones, deep ones. Once you find bones, clean white scattered, not animal. Some prisoners swear the wolves only come for the sick, that they can smell weakness, that they wait just beyond the tree line for someone to wander too far from the group. One man says he saw eyes blinking in the distance, watching. You don't laugh, you've seen them too. The land isn't just cold and dangerous, it's endless. That's the part that really breaks you. No walls, no borders, no end in sight. Just kilometers of nothing. That's why the guards don't need to build higher fences. Nature is the fence. The perfect prison perimeter. Where are you going to go? What are you going to eat? What's going to stop you from lying down under a tree and deciding not to get up? There's a story that gets passed around, always half laughed, half whispered, about a group of prisoners who escaped and survived for months by eating tree bark and hunting squirrels. Then one day, one of them cooked stew that tasted too good, too rich, too fatty. The others didn't ask questions. Not right away, but after that, no one else went missing. True or not, the story lives on. A fringe legend, a warning, or maybe a promise. Scholars sometimes argue over whether the land itself was chosen for its brutality, or whether the Gulag simply expanded into whatever territory it could consume. Either way, the result is the same. You live under 2 tyrannies. One wears a uniform, the other wears silence. And yet sometimes there's beauty here. At sunset, the snow turns pink, almost soft. The trees catch the light and throw it back in gold. You see deer once, real deer, with breath steaming and eyes wide. They look at you like you don't belong here. They're right. The old geographer tells you about auroras, those ribbons of light that dance across the sky in winter. Says they appear in Stalin's shifting colours like smoke. You want to see one. Just once, not because it'll save you, but because it might remind you that the world is bigger than this place, that somewhere there's still light. Tonight, when you lie down in the barrack, your face stings from the wind, your knees ache. Your hands feel like they're made of stone, but when you close your eyes, you see the forest again. Not the work, not the snow, but the stillness, the bigness, the stars above it all, sharp and endless. Nature doesn't love you, but it doesn't hate you either. It just is. And sometimes that's better than anything you get from the guards. There are days when nothing feels sharp. Not the cold, not the hunger, not even the fear. Just this dull ache. Oh. Like your soul's been wrapped in wet wool. The wind still howls. The guards still shout. But inside you it's all muted. Flat. That's how you know you're approaching the edge. The place where even despair starts to get bored. Which is why holidays, absurd as it sounds, become oddly important. Today is, well, they say it's a holiday. You don't know which one. Could be New Year's. Could be Victory Day. Could be a birthday belonging to someone you're supposed to admire. No one really cares. What matters is that something feels different. The mood in the yard is lighter. No work orders are posted this morning. The guards are tense but not cruel. You even hear a song, low and rusty, coming from one of the barracks. You're still not allowed to sleep in, of course. Line-up happens like always, with the same miscount, the same frostbitten silence. But after that, instead of the mines or the timber run, you're told to report to the mess hall. Not to eat, obviously, but to observe, which usually means stand around and pretend you're grateful. Inside, the tables are wiped down. A cloth hangs crookedly across the front wall. Someone's scratched out a crude banner on brown paper. Sis Presnicum. Happy holiday? The ink runs in places. The paper curls at the edges. It looks like a sad decoration at a funeral for joy, but still it's something. And then the miracle. Food. Not just the usual watery gruel, not the soup that tastes like wet ash. Real food. Or something pretending to be. A thicker stew, maybe. Chunks of beet. A slice of fish with the skin still on. Bread that's not just black brick. Even a spoonful of kasha, porridge. Someone says they spotted a sugar cube at the front of the line. You don't believe it, but you shuffle forward anyway, heart pounding like it's Christmas morning. You haven't believed in Christmas since your second year here. You get your portion, you sit down, you stare at it, then you eat, slowly, reverently, like a prayer. No one talks, no one dares joke or complain. You just chew, swallow, and hope your body doesn't mistake the calories for hallucination. After the meal, there's a show. That's what they call it anyway. The cultural brigade, made up of prisoners who still remember music and language, has prepared a performance. It's absurd, it's beautiful. One man recites poetry, Pushkin of course. Another plays a makeshift balalaika with 3 strings and a frame made from a bucket lid. A woman sings a folk song in a high, clear voice that makes your ribs ache. You've heard this one before, something about a river, a lover, and a long walk home. Everyone knows she's singing about the camp, whether she means to or not. Even the guards are quieter than usual. One of them actually claps when the song ends. Just once, quickly, like he forgot where he was. Afterward, the mood lingers for an hour or two. Prisoners trade small jokes. Someone gives you a piece of boiled potato from their plate, and you swear you'll remember the taste forever. Swan walks by, her scarf pulled tight around her chin, and for a moment, just one moment, she looks at you like you're not in a prison camp, like you're just 2 people who know how to look. It's brief, but it's real. Some say the holidays are allowed to keep morale up. Others say it's a trick, to make you feel grateful for table scraps and poetry before dragging you back to the pit. There's an ongoing academic argument about this very thing. Were these celebrations a tactic of control, or a thin veil of state propaganda meant to humanize the inhuman? Some scholars insist it was the regime throwing prisoners a bone. Others say it was prisoners seizing moments of agency within the cracks of tyranny. You don't need a study to tell you it's both. You remember one winter when the celebration turned ugly. The Cultural Brigade performed a parody sketch, harmless really. Just a few jabs at the food, the sleeping arrangements, the broken stove, but one of the guards didn't laugh. The next day, the lead performer tripped and broke his jaw. No one ever performed again in that camp. But here, for now, it's peaceful. Even the weather seems to understand. The wind dies down. The sun slips out for a few minutes and throws gold over the snow. You stand near the barrack wall and let it hit your face, eyes closed, face tilted up like a sunflower. Someone tells a joke about Stalin, quietly, risky. But the group laughs anyway, quickly, nervously, like they're stealing something. You laugh too, not because it's funny. Because you remember what laughter used to feel like. Later you find a pine cone on the ground, just sitting there out of place. You pick it up, turn it in your hand. It smells like sap, like trees, like something older than this place. You take it back to your bunk and place it on the shelf above your head. A decoration, or maybe just a reminder. That night the barrack feels different. Warmer maybe, or just less sharp. Someone is humming the folk song again. No one tells them to stop. You lie there in the dark, full, for the first time in months, and you let the memory of the stew roll through your body like a second skin. It won't last, you know that. Tomorrow the quotas will return, the guards will bark, the cold will climb back into your bones and nest there. But tonight, you have eaten, you have heard music, you have laughed. And in a place built to crush every part of you that still remembers the world, that's the closest thing to victory. You wake to silence, not the usual kind, the soft groaning of bunk, the shuffling of boots, the wind pouring at the walls, but a deeper quiet. The kind that presses on your chest, the kind that means something's wrong. You open your eyes and immediately see that someone's missing from the bunk across from you. No blanket, no boots at the edge, just a bare wood-scratched slab. You don't say anything, neither does anyone else. Disappearance is part of life here, or rather part of death. It doesn't come with announcements. There's no alarm, no speech, no dramatic dragging through the snow. It just happens. One moment a person is there, the next. They're a memory no one dares speak aloud. It's cleaner that way, safer. Because if you ask questions, you might be next. Officially, there are no executions in this camp. That's what the paperwork says. The guards say it too, if they say anything at all. The state doesn't execute people anymore. Not without trials, forms, signatures. It's a modern institution after all. Civilized. But every prisoner knows the truth. Sometimes people just vanish. Quietly, permanently. Their name never appears on the labour list again. Their ration ticket disappears from the hooks in the mess hall. Their bunk gets reassigned without a word. There's no bullet count in the reports, just fewer mouths to feed. The man who disappeared last night was a Latvian teacher, old and gentle. He spoke softly and translated Pushkin into his own language during work breaks. A few days ago, someone said they heard him mutter something under his breath during roll call. Something about injustice, about rotting for a lie. Just a whisper, but someone must have heard. And worse, someone must have repeated it. You remember his face lined and pale. You remember his hands, always moving like he was still at a blackboard. You try to remember his name, you can't. It's already fading. The guards don't mention him. Not during head count, not in the work assignment, not during the evening check. That's how you know it was deliberate. If he had died in his sleep, they'd drag him out in daylight, let the rest of you see. That's how the system shows its strength with public spectacle. But when they don't want you to see, that's the real fear. Because what happens in the dark is worse than what happens in the square. There's a place behind the camp kitchens, a clearing beyond the latrines, fenced but unmarked. No signs, no posted guards. Everyone calls it the quiet yard. No one goes near it. At night, when the wind is low, you sometimes hear shovels there. Not the clink of metal on rock, the soft scrape of earth, controlled, unhurried, like a secret being buried. You once asked what it was back when you were new. A woman with a face like weather told you it's where the snow learns not to talk. You didn't ask again. There's scholarly debate about how widespread executions were in the Gulag after the worst years of the purges. Some argue the numbers dropped after 1939, that Stalin shifted toward longer sentences rather than bullets. Others say that's propaganda, that the killings simply got quieter, more efficient, more deniable. You live in the footnote of that debate. You know what you've seen, or rather what you haven't seen. Sometimes it's an accident. A man falls from a scaffolding. Another freezes to death 10 feet from the stove. One man allegedly starves himself out of despair, though he'd been eating double rations the week before. The paperwork gets filed, a number goes into a report, a family back home receives a letter with carefully chosen words. And then there are the ones who walk into the forest and never come back. Not escapees, just wanderers. Maybe they knew their name was on a list. Maybe they just wanted control over how it ended. You hear about a woman who left a note scratched into her bunk. Better the wolves than another winter. There's a joke, black as coal and told only once, that the safest place in the Gulag is already dead. No labour quota, no informants, no roll call, no more watching what you say, you laugh when you hear it. You have to. The only other option is screaming. That night, a new prisoner arrives. Younger than most, clean, dazed. He stares too much, talks too loud. He asks where the teacher went. No one answers. He asks again. A thief glares at him. The boy gets the message. He stops asking. The bunk is filled by mourning. You start to notice the absences more. The unspoken count, the extra spoon on the table, the way the guards list has a gap in the numbers, the way everyone avoids saying it out loud. Not because they don't care, but because saying it out loud might make it real, might make you next. There's something uniquely terrifying about silence in this place, not just the kind that blankets the forest, but the institutional kind. The sanctioned forgetting. It's not just about disappearing bodies, it's about erasing meaning. No record, no grave, no marker, just absence. Like someone erased a line from a story and kept writing like nothing happened. One day you wake to find another bunk empty. No surprise, no name, no words. You lie there in the cold and stare at the ceiling. You don't pray, you don't even hope. You just remember, a face, a phrase, the way someone coughed in rhythm with their work. You wonder how many more you'll lose, You wonder if anyone will remember you when your time comes. Maybe someone will. Maybe they won't. But for now, you keep your head down and you never ask why the snow's darker near the quiet yard. You're halfway through your shift, hands numb around a shovel, when someone whispers the word behind you. Just one word, barely carried on the wind, but it stops your body cold. Cannibals. You don't turn around, you don't respond, you keep shoveling, because reacting makes it real, because you've heard the word before and you know how it crawls into the cracks of your thoughts and sits there like frost, waiting. You don't want to hear this story, but you also know it'll be all anyone talks about tonight. It always starts with a rumour. Someone found bones behind the laundry hut. Someone saw a bunkmate chewing something that wasn't bread. Someone caught a man burying meat, alone. It's never confirmed, never reported, but the tension builds in the room like a zabel. Slow, sour, impossible to wash off. You've seen starvation before, felt it. You know the way it rearranges a person from the inside out, how it turns the mind soft and loose, makes the world blur at the edges. You've seen men fight over fish heads, over boiled onion water. You've seen women trade everything they had. Boots, coats, dignity, for a slice of black bread with crust on it. So the idea of someone breaking past that last barrier, well, you wish you could say it surprises you, but it doesn't. Back in the barracks, after roll call the rumours sharpen. They say it happened in another camp, always another camp. Farther north, farther east. A work brigade caught in a snowstorm, cut off for 10 days. Only 3 returned, one of them limping. The guards said nothing, just reassigned the survivors and burned their clothes. Someone else claims it happened here, last winter, that a man named Borodin, now mysteriously absent, was found gnawing on a piece of liver under his bunk, that a guard looked the other way, that they handled it quietly, though no official punishment, just a relocation. That's the word they use when they mean something worse. You want to laugh it off. You want to say, don't be ridiculous. That's a myth. That's propaganda. But you've been here too long to dismiss what fear leaves behind. You've seen people carried out on sleds with their fingers chewed down to the bone. Frostbite, the guard says. But you remember how the other prisoners turned their heads when they passed. You remember the one who wouldn't meet your eye for days after. There's an older man in your block, face like old bark, who tells it straight. We're not animals until we're made to be, and this place, it makes you. Then he goes quiet again. You try to sleep that night, but your stomach groans in protest. You haven't had more than boiled cabbage and salted fish water in 2 days. Someone coughs in the corner. The bunk above creaks. You think about meat, real meat. Then you force the thought away before it forms. The line between survival and savagery is razor thin here, and the Gulag is designed to keep you dancing on the edge of it. There's a psychological term someone once told you, maybe a prisoner with more education than sense. Moral injury, when you survive by violating your own boundaries. When you cross a line you can't uncross. The term haunts you now, not because you've crossed it, but because you understand how someone could. A prisoner named Miller confides in you one night. She's small, quiet, a slip of a person you've barely spoken to before. She tells you that during her transfer, her train broke down in the wilderness for 3 days. No food, no heat, just a car full of people locked from the outside. One woman didn't make it. We didn't eat her, Mila says, eyes hollow, but we thought about it. Then she laughs, dry, horrible. That was the part that scared me. Another man claims the guards used to encourage it. During the worst winters, they'd ration the food even lower in certain blocks just to see what happened. Research, he mutters, a social experiment. You tell him he's paranoid. He says, isn't everyone? There's debate among historians about how widespread cannibalism was in the camps. Some insist it was rare, isolated, exaggerated by those who wanted to demonize the system. Others argue it was far more common, just shrouded in secrecy and shame. You'd botos, standing on the floorboards of the barrack while your stomach chews itself, don't know who's right. But you know this, when hunger becomes a god, it demands terrible worship. You've noticed people watching each other differently lately. Not in suspicion, something deeper. Assessment, as if they're recalculating worth in terms of meat and muscle. A glance at someone's legs, someone's arms. You hate that you notice it too, that your brain, in its quiet, desperate place, is starting to do the math. You shake it off. You eat your bread slower the next day, trying to stretch it into something real. You give half your ration to the girl who stitched your glove. You do it because you must because you're trying to push back against the gravity pulling everyone downward, against the slow descent into inhumanity. But still, the stories continue. You hear one about a man who kept a friend alive just long enough to stay fed for a week. Another about a woman who traded bones to the kitchen in exchange for broth. No one admits to knowing these people. But they all tell the tales with the same haunted voice, like they're describing a version of themselves they hope they never become. The camp commandant calls it slander. These are lies, he says during inspection. Enemies of the people create these rumours to divide you. But no one listens. We've all seen what the commandant eats. Meat, real meat. While we gnaw on salt crust and hope it tastes like something else. At night, when you lie in your bunk and pull the blanket over your head, the fear isn't just of the guards, or the snow, or the labour that shreds your bones. It's fear of yourself, of what you might become. Of how long you can hold on before hunger rewrites your morality like it rewrote your waistline and your sleep cycle. You dream of dinner tables, ones from your past, glowing with candles, with laughter, with chicken and herbs and soft bread. You wake up chewing on your sleeve, and still you stay, because what else is there? You count your ribs, you count your days, you count your rations like prayers, and when someone goes missing you don't ask questions, because questions mean you know, and knowing is its own kind of hunger. It happens suddenly. No warning, no reason you can see. One morning you wake to the guard shouting not for line-up but for bags. Gathering. Confusion ripples through the barracks. Prisoners glance at each other, then at the guards. Bags! You don't have bags, just rags and boots. Still, everyone starts wrapping their few possessions in cloth, bread crusts, a spoon, a ragged cap. The pine cone you kept as a reminder of the outside world. You clutch it like a relic. You don't know where you're going, but you know better than to leave it behind. Transfer. That's the word whispered, as you shuffle us toward the gates. Nobody says it out loud, but it hangs in the air like smoke. Transfers are roulette. Some mean a lighter camp, more food, less labour, warmer barracks. Others mean the opposite. Mines, swamps, sickness, death within weeks. You don't choose, you don't know, you just march toward the trucks with your bundle, and your heartbeat pounding like a drum. The guards herd you into a line. Dogs bark, boots crunch, the air smells of fuel and frost. The trucks are waiting, their wooden beds rimmed with wire. You climb in with the others, shoulder to shoulder, body heat pressed tight. The doors slam shut. Darkness swallows you. The truck lurches forward. You travel for hours, or maybe days, it's impossible to tell. Time loses shape when you're rattling around in the back of a freezing truck, knees jammed against strangers, lungs filling with exhaust fumes. The air grows thinner the longer you ride. Someone vomits. Someone else passes out. The guards don't stop. They never stop. Not for food, not for air, not even when one of the prisoners goes still and doesn't wake up. His body slumps against yours for the rest of the trip, heavy and cold. You remember your first transport, how terrifying it was, how the cattle car smelled of urine and despair. This one isn't much different. Maybe worse. At least trains sometimes had straw. Trucks don't. The whispers begin. A man near you says you're headed to a mining camp. Another says you're being sent north to chop ice roads. Someone else swears you're all going to a punishment camp reserved for repeat offenders. None of it helps. Every version is bad. There's a theory among prisoners that transfers aren't about efficiency at all, that the state just moves bodies around to keep everyone destabilised. Never let anyone settle. Never let friendships grow too strong. Never let hope calcify into routine. Always churn the human soup, as scholars later argue whether that's true or paranoia. Living it, you don't see much difference. When the truck finally stops, the back door slams open and daylight pours in. The guards bark orders. You stumble out, legs stiff, eyes stinging. The world looks the same, snow wire towers, but it feels different. This camp is bigger, the barracks taller, the air harsher. You hear coughing everywhere, a hacking chorus. And the smell, burnt coal mixed with rot. It hits your nose like a warning. The first thing you notice, new rules. Every camp has its own rhythm, its own micro-dictatorships. Here, guards shout less but hit faster. Here the thieves rule the food line openly, no pretense. Here the barracks are so crowded that people sleep in shifts, half lying down, half sitting up, trading spots like clockwork. You realise quickly, survival here will require a whole new set of instincts. Your old allies may not be here, Swan isn't, Carson isn't, the violinist isn't, You're surrounded by strangers again. Faces pale, eyes sharp, some already half gone. You feel the loneliness hit harder than the cold. One man, thick-necked with tattoos across his knuckles, sizes you up the moment you enter the barrack. He doesn't smile, he doesn't blink. You look away, quick. Already the hierarchy is shifting. You're new, you're vulnerable, you're prey until proven otherwise. That night, you can't sleep. The bunks are packed tighter than ever, the air heavy with sweat and mould. You hear someone whispering a prayer in Georgian, someone else scratching into the wood above their head. You clutch your pine cone, the only thing linking you to the last place, the last routine. You wonder if this is how it feels for a tree to be uprooted, shoved into foreign soil, forced to grow crooked. There's a scholarly debate about whether transfers extended survival by redistributing labour, or shortened it by breaking morale. Some researchers argue they were logistical necessities, moving workers where the state needed them most. Others claim they were deliberate psychological weapons, stripping prisoners of stability just when they'd started to adapt. From your perspective, it doesn't matter. Both can be true. Both are true. 2 weeks into the new camp, you hear about another transfer. Different barracks, different prisoners. The rumour says they're headed west, toward a camp with shorter shifts and real doctors. The rumour says someone there actually survived 10 years. The rumour says anything it needs to say to keep you moving. You learn quickly not to unpack your things, not that you have many, not to memorise faces too deeply, not to believe in permanence, because at any moment another guard can shout "Sporbo" and you'll be gone again, leaving behind whatever fragile threads of identity you manage to weave. The Gulag never lets you belong anywhere. Not to a place, not to people, not even to yourself. One night an older prisoner tells you, every transfer is a death. The trick is to keep being reborn. You don't know if that's wisdom or just a way of dressing up despair, but you repeat it to yourself anyway, because the truck could come tomorrow, or next week, or tonight, and you'll climb in because you have no choice, and the wheel will spin again. You never thought you'd make it to the word release. Not in any real way. Not in the way people outside imagine, with paperwork, a handshake, maybe a train ticket and a coat. In the Gulag, the idea of getting out becomes a fairy tale. You stop letting yourself think about it somewhere around year 2. Or was it 3? The calendar stopped making sense a long time ago. All you know is that today, a guard calls your name, not for punishment, not for transfer, just your name, twice, clipped and official, and then the words, "Osvoboždenie," release. For a few seconds, nothing happens in your brain. You don't react. You think maybe you misheard, but then a hand shoves a thin packet of documents into your chest and a stubby pencil to sign something you can't read. Your fingers move before your mind does. It feels like a dream, a stupid one, stitched together by hope-starved neurons. But the ink dries and the guard doesn't laugh and no one stops you. You're escorted to a side building, not the main gates. A small room with a single chair and a pile of civilian clothes that smell like dust and old oil. You strip, you dress. You see yourself in a crack mirror and flinch. The person in the glass isn't you, they're smaller, sharper, greyer. The bones in your face look like they've given up on hiding. You run your hand across your chin and realise it doesn't even feel like your own skin anymore. They give you a piece of paper, a release certificate. No apology, no explanation. It says your sentence is fulfilled. Just like that. As if all of this was a library fine. As if your life, your years, the pieces of yourself you left in frozen soil have all been properly accounted for and returned to you with a stamp. You expect someone to say goodbye. No one does. You expect the other prisoners to watch you go. They don't, because they've learned better than to envy the released. And maybe they know the truth, that you're not really leaving. Outside the gates, it's just snow and silence, a dirt road, a sky like wet ash. You stand there in your mismatched clothes, holding your documents like a child clutches homework, and you wait for something to happen. It doesn't. Eventually a truck comes. You climb in without speaking. No one in the cab looks at you. You don't ask where you're going. The ride is long, quiet. The air doesn't smell like fear anymore, just fuel and winter. You pass trees, you pass fences, you pass the edge of what you thought was your world. They drop you at a train station barely worthy of the name. One sign, one bench, no ticket booth. The train comes an hour later, creaking like it's ashamed of itself. You get on, you sit. You try to understand what this is supposed to feel like. It doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like being unhooked from something massive and brutal and stupid, but not like being set free, more like being misplaced. The train moves, forests pass by, small towns, smokestacks, and every few minutes you glance up at the window half expecting to see a guard standing there, shaking his head, saying, "Just kidding, back you go." But no one comes. You arrive in a city. You don't know which one at first. Everything is too loud, too fast. There are colours again, so many of them it makes your eyes sting. People rush around like they've never stood in a breadline. They laugh, they scowl, they shot. You walk through the crowd and feel like a ghost with a bad haircut. You find a place to sleep, barely. A bench under a broken street lamp. A stranger gives you a cigarette and doesn't ask for anything in return. You nearly cry. Not from gratitude, from the sheer shock of a human gesture that isn't wrapped in violence or barter. You try to find food. Your stomach is a stranger now, tight and small. You buy bread from a kiosk with money given to you at the camp. The same kind they give to everyone when they're done. Enough for a week if you don't get robbed. You eat it too fast and nearly vomit. You hear about others, ex-prisoners like you, who tried to go home. But what does home mean after this? Some find their houses gone. Families moved on, names scrubbed from records. Some are told to report to local authorities just to check in. You know what that means. Surveillance, another file, another net, waiting to snap closed. For politicals like you, the term release doesn't come with forgiveness. You're still marked, branded, a former enemy of the people. You might be out of the Gulag, but you're still in the system. You can't vote. You can't hold most jobs. You have to apply for permission to move. You're expected to stay quiet, grateful, invisible. And if you speak up, if you write something, say something, try to tell your story, there's always another train, another signature, another mistake. You hear about a man who was released in 1950 and arrested again in 1951 for telling a joke about a tractor. You hear about a woman who tried to publish a memoir and was quietly relocated, again, and yet you still breathe different air. That counts for something. You still wake up when you want to, on a bench, in a basement, under a roof when you're lucky. No whistles, no quotators, no inspections. You learn to smile again, sort of. You find work eventually, menial, backbreaking, anonymous. You start talking to someone in the housing line. You laugh at a joke on the radio. You try not to flinch when someone knocks on your door. And sometimes, late at night, when the city is quiet and you're alone, you reach into your coat pocket and feel the pine cone still there. You rub your thumb across it. A talisman. A reminder that you were there, that you survived, that someone like you can go through that machine and come out the other side, even if you're missing pieces. They released your body. They never got your soul. Not completely. There's a moment every former prisoner faces, usually alone, when you realise you're not in the Gulag anymore. But the Gulag is still in you. It lingers like frostbite that never quite heals. You carry it in your back, your breath, the way you scan a room before entering. And most of all, you carry it in your silence. You don't talk about it. Not really. Not to strangers. Not to friends. Not even to the kind-eyed woman who lets you rent half of her closet-sized room near the tram depot. She doesn't ask questions, which is why you trust her more than anyone. She just hands you your share of the bread in the morning and nods when you leave for the factory. That's all the intimacy you can handle. It's not that you don't want to talk about the camps. It's that you can't. Not safely. The state may have handed you your papers, but it still owns your story. Still owns the version of events that's allowed to exist. Rehabilitation is a word that gets thrown around sometimes, but it's bureaucratic nonsense, just ink on files. You know men who were told their sentences were a mistake, then watch their neighbours vanish a week later for asking too many questions. So no, you don't talk, and besides, who would believe you? Try telling someone about the time the guards made you stand barefoot in the snow for 4 hours because someone stole a belt. Or the time a man disappeared mid-lunch and his bowl of soup was redistributed before it went cold. Or the night you watched a fellow prisoner sob while chewing on his own boot leather, just to stop the hunger from screaming in his skull. You're not sure you'd believe it yourself if it hadn't happened to you. You've heard of others who tried, survivors who wrote everything down, who sent letters to newspapers, who spoke in dark corners of smoky kitchens about the truth. And you know what happened to most of them. Watched, fired, rearrested on technicalities. And if they were lucky, if they just faded into obscurity, swallowed by the same quiet that devoured the men buried behind the barracks. But some didn't stay quiet. You hear whispers about a man named Solzhenitsyn, a former prisoner like you, He wrote a book, they say, a real one. Not just notes hidden under a bunk or poems scratched into a bar of soap, but a full account. Names, dates, places. It was published abroad, smuggled out, people read it. The system panicked. The man was exiled, but he told the truth, or enough of it to hurt. You feel something when you hear this. Not hope. Hope's too fragile, too greedy, but recognition. That someone else couldn't carry the weight of silence anymore either. That maybe your memories aren't just private scars. Maybe they're evidence. Maybe they matter. Of course, there's still danger. The state has changed since the height of the purges, but not that much. Files disappear, people vanish, denial remains the official policy. The Gulag wasn't cruelty, they say, it was necessity. It wasn't punishment. It was correction. It wasn't murder. It was discipline. All wrapped in polite phrases and footnotes. There's a fringe debate among modern scholars, ones with courage or naivety, about how much the population knew during the height of the camps. Were people truly unaware, or did they simply not ask? You can't answer for them. But you remember how many looked away when the vans came? How many changed the subject when names were whispered? How many nodded during parades and never mentioned the men who stopped coming to work? You're not angry at them, not really. That's the thing the Gulag teaches you above all, how fear seeps into everything. Even the bystanders were prisoners of a kind, just in wider cells with better blankets. Still, it's lonely being free. Not just physically, but mentally. You walk through crowds where no one knows what you've seen. You hold a steaming cup of tea and think about frostbite. You hear laughter and wonder how it would sound if they knew what you knew. But sometimes at night you write. Not much, just a few sentences at a time, a memory, a detail. You don't sign your name, you hide the pages under a floorboard. You know they'll probably never be found. But it's not about fame. It's about not letting the past rot in your bones like spoiled meat. And you're not alone. Over time you meet others, quiet people, with watchful eyes and sudden flinches when boots echo on pavement. You recognise each other. By the way, you never sit with your back to the door. You talk about weather and bread and politics in safe, flat ways. But the real conversation is under the surface, passed in nods and glances and pauses that say, I know. I remember too. You find out the violinist survived. Lives in a town 2 oblasts over. Doesn't play anymore. But he teaches. That's enough. You hear a whisper, maybe false, that Swan was seen in Moscow walking with a limp, but alive. It makes your chest tighten in a way that feels dangerous. You don't try to find her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But the knowledge that she might be alive, that's a gift you keep like fire in your pocket. Years pass, the world shifts, leaders change, borders crack, but the system lingers. The silence still holds. The archives remain locked. The bodies stay buried in forests no one dares name. And yet, the truth leaks out. Not in floods, but in trickles. A page here, a testimony there, a memoir smuggled into a university library in another country. A radio broadcast late at night, heard by someone who recognises a name. A pine cone kept in a drawer for 50 years by a man who still remembers what he promised himself under a frozen skim. You walk by a bookstore one afternoon and see a display in the window. The title catches your breath. Something about camps, about survival. You stand there too long, then walk away, but you come back the next day and the next. You don't buy it. But knowing it exists, that's enough for now, because someone is listening, someone is writing it down, and someone, someday, will know. You're older now, not just in years, though there are plenty of those, but in a way that makes your bones feel more like witness statements than scaffolding. Your body remembers things your mind has started to soften around. The sting of wind through torn gloves, the weight of wet wool, the ache of hunger so sharp it curled your spine. These memories no longer shout, but they whisper at you constantly, woven into every movement. And today they're louder than usual because you're standing at the edge of a place that doesn't officially exist. It's taken decades, literally. Years of waiting, of watching the political tides turn just enough, of files being declassified, of a few brave voices rising above the white noise of state-sponsored forgetting. And now, somehow, you've made it back, to the forest, to the place where the road ends, to the shadows of the barracks long since collapsed. What's left of the camp isn't much, a foundation here, a beam rotting sideways in the moss, bits of barbed wire swallowed by trees that have grown fat and tall without permission. Nature is reclaiming it, not out of mercy, but indifference. You step carefully. Not just because the ground is unseeable, but because this place still feels sacred. Not in the holy sense, in the haunted one. You're not alone. A small group walks beside you. People with notebooks and cameras, translators and historians. One of them hands you a small microphone. Ask gently if you'd like to say a few words. You don't at first, then you do. You tell them about the cold, about the silence, about the way the guards never needed to shout because the fear did all the work. You tell them about the pine cone you kept and how you still keep it in a drawer near your bed. You tell them about the woman who embroidered flowers into gloves and the man who hummed symphonies in his sleep. You say their names aloud, carefully, like lighting candles. They ask if you can show them where the quiet yard was. You nod. It's not easy. The landscape has changed. The paths are overgrown, the trees thicker now. But your feet remember. Your body, that old ledger of frost and labour, remembers. And eventually you stop in a clearing where the trees are just slightly wrong, too symmetrical, too still. You point. Here. They mark it. They take photos. They lay a small wooden plaque near the ground. It reads, "In memory of those who vanished without record, may they not be forgotten." You stand over it for a while. You don't cry. You did all your crying in the dark years ago, where no one could see. This is something different, something quiet, like breathing after being underwater too long. There's still debate, of course, always will be. Politicians argue about numbers, about accountability, about how much truth can be safely acknowledged without shaking the foundation of the state. Some still call it an unfortunate necessity. Some say it wasn't as bad as the West makes it sound. Some say it never happened at all, but you don't argue anymore. You don't have to, because you're standing in the ruins, because your story is already written on your hands, your back, your silences, because you're still here. That night you sit around a campfire with the others. Some are survivors like you, most are younger, students, journalists, the kind of people who still believe in words like justice and truth. You envy them a little. You also love them for it. One of them asks you the hardest question. How did you survive? You don't know how to answer. You could talk about luck, about instinct, about how sometimes your body just refused to die. But that's not really it. Not all of it. So instead, you tell them this. You survived because someone once gave you half a crust of bread without asking for anything back. Because a stranger looked away when they could have reported you. Because you memorized a poem. Because you stitched your name into the lining of your coat just so something of you might remain. Because you had a pine cone in your pocket and it reminded you of a tree that hadn't been cut down yet. You survived because somehow in all of it you remembered you were human and you never let that memory go. One by one, the fire dies down. People drift off to tents, to sleeping bags, to notebooks. You stay behind a little longer, letting the stars settle over you. They look the same as they did all those years ago. Cold, sharp, indifferent. But tonight, they don't feel like watchers. They feel like witnesses. You reach into your coat and pull out the pine cone. Still there after all these years. Lighter now, fragile. You place it gently at the base of the plaque. Not to leave it behind, just to give it context. And you whisper to the trees, in case they remember too, I was here, we were here. And then you walk away. So here we are, at the edge of it all. You've walked the length of a system designed not just to punish, but to erase. You've sat in the snow, broken rocks, dodged informants, eaten boiled water and survived nights colder than reason. You've seen 1,000 small deaths that didn't involve blood, but silence. And now, after 30 chapters and 30,000 words, you're still standing. Which is more than a lot of real people got to do. You've met the ones who disappeared in the middle of lunch. The ones who hummed symphonies no one else could hear. The ones who folded poems into their shoes and wrote their names into logs just to exist somewhere, somehow. You've watched people vanish behind euphemisms, transfer, relocation, disciplinary action, while others dared to smuggle truth into the world one whispered story at a time. And maybe in all of this, you felt something strange. Not just horror, not just outrage, but empathy. A connection to lives lived on the thinnest thread imaginable. Because that's what the Gulag ultimately challenges in you, the belief that history is about numbers and theories. It's not. It's about people. Cold, scared, defiant people who refuse to let the world forget them. So if there's one thing you take from this, let it be that. Remember them, not with guilt, not with pity, but with respect. Tell someone what you heard tonight. Pass it on, not because you're trying to change the world, but because you're refusing to let this part of it be erased. And if that feels small, good. Small is where resistance starts. Small is where memory survives. Now, take a deep breath, let it go. You've been holding tension in your jaw this whole time, haven't you? Maybe sip some water, maybe crack the window, let in some air, and then maybe tomorrow, when you're walking to work or scrolling your phone or microwaving leftovers, you'll feel the faintest tug in your chest. A quiet reminder that once, far away and not so long ago, someone just like you looked up at the same sky, took a deep breath, and decided to live.